Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots. My name is Erika, and I really like to watch horror movies.
My name is Katy, and I really like to overanalyze things.
Katy, what are we overanalyzing today?
A little film called Final Girls.
The Final Girls.
The Final Girls.
Yes.
Don't forget the article.
From 2015, not to be confused with a film of a very similar name that came out in the exact same year.
Oh, The Final Girl?
No, just Final Girl.
Final Girl.
Yeah, so this is The Final Girls.
Yes, plural.
I'm glad we got that cleared up.
Which is a better name, because pluralizing Final Girl
Yeah.
is like the singular Final Girl,
Yes.
but it's The Final Girls.
The Final Girls.
Like, obviously, they're doing something there.
Something's happening.
They're subverting.
Which this movie does.
Yes.
Yeah, so you and I, neither of us had seen this movie before.
No, it was recommended to us by Sound Guy Matt.
Yeah. And after, I think we watched it separately of each other, but after we both watched it, I think we came together and realized that this is not a horror movie.
Yeah, I was like, I liked it, but I don't know what we're going to...
Yeah, like, you know me, I always start my notes with, like, the good horror stuff I like, and at the end of the movie, I had nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not that the movie doesn't have horror elements, it's just not a horror movie, it's a comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, we've talked about, you know, horror comedies before, like we did, like, last summer with Bodies, 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 right? Like, where the line is and how a movie can, you know, kind of...
Oh, we talked about with Krampus, too.
Oh, Krampus is
that
kind
one
of funny.
also,
Yep.
has, like... Yeah, we had some interesting discussions
Yeah,
about
so
it, I think, for
we've
that
talked about horror comedies on and off, depending on the movie we're touching
yeah.
on.
And
but
where they fall on the horror side and the comedy side. And
Yeah.
this one just kind of is not
comedy.
horror.
I'm thinking it's like 90-10 comedy.
Yeah.
And I have some reasons to back
it
that
just
up.
takes place in a horror film, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. The setting is a horror movie. That doesn't make it a horror movie.
Right, yeah. I have some ideas to back that up. First of all, it's rated PG-13.
Yeah.
Never a good start for a horror movie to be PG-13.
Is Krampus the only other one we did that was PG-13?
No, I think I know what you did
know
last
what you did last
summer
summer.
is PG-13.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not to say that there can't be an effective PG-13 horror. It just,
Yeah,
you know,
no. Because
appeals
I know
to
what
a
you did
wider
last
audience.
summer hits a lot of classic horror.
It really does. But you know me, I like my horror movies rated R.
As an aside, was Tarot PG-13?
I think yes,
I think
which is
so.
why it
Which
wasn't
was
very
the
good.
problem with it.
Which was the problem, yeah. Yeah, that is usually my critique of when I see like a new horror movie in theaters, and like I will go see a PG-13 horror, but usually my critique is, man, if it were R, it would have been a lot better.
They could have done more.
Could have done more. So it's PG.
Well, in this one, they made it PG-13. As I think happens a lot with movies. They had original ideas that were
profitable.
more R, and then
Yeah.
it was like scaled back to make it PG-13.
Yeah, it's more profitable to be PG-13. Although I almost kind of wonder if that's changing. Like, remember when the first Deadpool came out?
Oh, yeah.
And it was like the first rated R superhero movie. It made a ton of money.
Yeah.
Right. So it's PG-13, so already a strike against it. We get sort of a little bit of a time loop situation,
Yes.
like in Happy Death Day.
Yeah, it could have been a time loop.
But time loops are also...
But it only, they
I
don't
think-
engage with that part of it.
Yeah, and no, not really. But also the time loop premise to me is more comedic.
I also feel like I almost expected them to go back to it. This is getting a little bit into the plot. When once one of them dies, I'm like, why did they not just go back out of the camp and sit down and wait for it to loop again and see if he came back? You know what I mean?
Interesting.
I was like, why not try to get him back? He
Yeah.
just fucking died.
I don't know. A couple other reasons. Well, actually, that's funny because the character's name's Duncan.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's really funny because, you know, we've been talking about slashers for the last few episodes now. And I think it's pretty obvious that Duncan's meant to be the scholar. Like, he's the one who has knowledge of this film and the plot and stuff. And so he dies first. And so, like, there's no way for the other members of the group to, like, prepare for what happens in the rest of the movie because Duncan died first.
It felt very like, as often happens in, this is a teaser for my literary corner.
Can't wait.
As often happens in a hero's journey. The mentor figure has to die so that the hero needs to continue without the, the benefit of that person's knowledge and experience.
Right, but
they need to go on with their own
But
skills.
doesn't the mentor for a while? Because I don't think Duncan does.
I mean, he does a
any
little bit.
mentoring. Anyway, and then the last thing.
I mean, he's the one who figures out that it's the movie and they're stuck in it.
Yeah.
what they have to do to get out of it is probably, you know.
Yeah.
And like what the rules are, he outlines them in the same way that like Randy does in Scream.
Yeah, but then he flies too close to the sun.
He sure
He
does.
gets a machete to the side.
Too close to the psycho killer.
The other one, the big one that's like, this is not a horror movie, is just the sheer lack of blood. Like, even when Duncan takes that machete to the side,
Yeah.
there's like a little bit of red, but I'm like, no, the clothes would be soaked in blood, right?
Yeah.
And also, when Adam Devine, Kurt, gets like thrown from the car,
You see a lot of body scrunch, but no blood.
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, sorry, but the CGI is not very good in that scene.
It just looks cartoony
and
silly.
some fake blood would really have
made it,
cleaned it up
rated
a bit.
R.
But and also rated R.
And I feel like they kind of allude to that a little bit in when they all watch the first the whore who dies in the horror movie that they're stuck in, which is the kind of flower child girl who runs into a random hiker.
Yes.
And they randomly have sex for no reason.
For no reason.
And then what's his name? Billy comes along.
Yes.
Billy Murphy comes along and kills them. And like they kind of talk about there being blood, but we don't really see it. And then he makes the joke about how it's like they probably just have corn syrup in their veins.
Yeah.
And like taste it.
And then he tastes it, which is gross.
But we don't really see the blood. So
No.
it's sort of like the movie that we're in has blood, but the movie that the audience is actually watching does not have blood.
Yeah, exactly. So
like Bloodbath, Camp Bloodbath is rated R.
Yes.
But we are
final
seeing
girls.
it
Yes.
through a PG-13 veil.
Yeah.
My other general thought for this film was that there were moments where I was like, I'm not sure if this is parody or bad writing.
Sure.
Partially with the horror.
Why not a little bit of both?
Yeah, I was just like, I don't know, I had that moment watching it where I was just sort of like, what I often think is like, wow, if my, loved one, my mom or whoever died suddenly, I don't have any home videos to go back and watch longingly.
Yeah.
All these people with dead parents and loved ones and dead wives all have these great videos to watch. Why do they all have home videos?
/ the movie that their mom was in 30 years before.
That's a different situation, but that's like such a common trope. And I was just sort of like, are they doing this on purpose? Like, is this meant to be like kind of funny? Or are they being serious about showing her grief for her mom?
Yeah.
Because then they do it again where it's like, oh, the Bloodbath movie double feature is happening on the anniversary of her mom's death. What a coincidence.
That seems in bad taste.
Yeah, I was like, is that just lazy symbolism on the movie's part? Or are they doing it just to hammer home like, oh, we're being over the top because we're being silly and parodying these sort of things.
Yeah. And it's also a little bit confusing in the way that, like, okay, I get it. Everybody in that theater, very reminiscent of Scream 2.
Yes.
Everybody in that theater is a terrible theater goer.
They're so obnoxious.
Openly drinking bottles. They're smoking.
Yes.
And so, like,
in an enclosed place.
Yeah. So, like, through some
like, ignore the fire hazard. Think about the people with asthma.
But don't ignore the fire hazard because a fire does
start.
And so, like, they never really explain it. They like go through the screen and enter the film.
Yeah, I guess. Quick synopsis we should have started with. This movie is about a woman whose mother was kind of a B-level actress
with like one main
credit and some stints on Law and Order and shit, that kind of actress. And she dies in a car accident, and a few years later Max is still really sad about her mom dying, but she has to go to this double feature to see her mom in her one big cult classic horror film.
Yeah, because she dies in the first one. She's not even in the sequel.
Yeah. And then a fire breaks out and they escape through the screen of the movie.
Yeah.
And end up inside of the movie.
And then they have to complete the movie to move on.
Yeah, and become the final girl.
Yes. So, as we've established that this is a comedy and not a horror, did you pick up anything that was particularly funny to you?
I think a lot of the lines were funny.
Yeah.
It does seem like a lot of them were kind of improvised.
Yeah.
Especially Adam Devine and the guy playing Duncan, whose name I can't think of.
Thomas Middleditch.
Yeah.
Yeah, Duncan and Kurt get a lot of...
and Gertie does too.
Comedy beats, and Gertie does too.
What?
Yeah.
Alia Shawkat?
Yeah. Showcat. I thought that just honestly the entire character of Tina was hilarious, right?
She did great.
Like, that is a really funny way to make the horror archetype of a whore work in a comedy.
Yes.
That she's just like compelled to start removing
Yes, she can't even help it. They
And
need
then
to like
she's, like,
cover her mittens and
like
things.
duct tape them on, and she's trying to get it off.
Yeah.
And then it's finally her time to shine, and she has to do the strip tease to get Billy, and they have like the whole trap set up, and I think that strip tease is hilarious.
Yeah, on all the
because
Adderall and
she's like hopped up on Adderall. She's wearing like
mittens,
oven mittens duct taped onto her. She's got a life vest.
Yes.
It's funny.
It's good. She does a great job.
Tina does great.
Another line I love, back to Gertie's character, which was another one that apparently the actor had more, was more involved in than the writers, is when she admits that she's not a virgin anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And she's
'cause
like,
the guy-
remember last summer that guy, I forget
The
his
mustache
name, with
went
the
to lot.
mustache. And our resident mean girl, Vicky, is like, wasn't that guy autistic?
Yeah.
And just like the look on Gertie's face when she's like,
Yes.
Yes, he was. And also very romantic. It's just like, I'm not taking your ableism.
Yeah, right.
What up? Oh, that's just really well done.
I believe he was very romantic.
Yes.
I love that for you.
Just like, get it, Gertie.
Yeah, so we really have two and a half main characters. We've got Max, played by Taissa Farmiga.
Yeah.
And then we have Amanda / Nancy.
Yes. Max's mom, Amanda, / the character she plays in the movie, Nancy.
Yes, and that actor's name is Malin Ackerman.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Lots of names that we struggle with.
Yeah, no, not for us. So it's interesting because we basically
They're very good actors who I'm very fond of whenever I see them.
Yeah, we meet Amanda first, right? Max's mom.
Yes.
Version of this character.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, like, she doesn't leave a very good impression.
Well, it reminded me a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street, where you had that sort of like reversal happening where the mom is acting kind of like a child and the child has to step up to be the parent, where it's like
a significant amount of child parentification.
Yeah, like they're in the car
in, like,
together.
The 2-minute scene
Yeah.
we see. Yeah.
Like Amanda's the one driving. She's the adult.
Yeah.
She's in the car. You know, she just, I guess, didn't get the call back, it sounds like, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe she still will, but doesn't sound like it. Yeah. And she is like sitting there talking about boys. Well, Max is like, how are we going to pay our bills?
Yeah, right.
And it's like, oh, you're a child.
Yeah,
you should not be worrying about this.
Worrying about bills.
And since 3 years later, they're like, what, seniors in high school?
Whatever, yeah.
She's like a freshman in high school having to worry about how they're going to pay the bills.
Yeah, right.
Like, that fucking sucks.
That's dumb.
It happens, but it fucking sucks.
And I just, also, Amanda, like, I get it that when we meet her, the one scene she's in, she's very frustrated. Like, but she's complaining about how, like, oh, she's only known for this slasher movie. But, like, that is the only thing she gets recognized for. Like, I think she should lean into it. You know, she's just like, oh, all they ever recognize me from is this movie I did 30 years ago. And it's like, yeah, but, like, she seems to want fame and recognition for her acting. So, like, you get recognized for something.
yeah.
Maybe that's a silver
But it's
lining.
not getting her other jobs.
Right, yeah.
I think it's pigeonholing her.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. She's
then-
like, I don't want to be known as just that shy girl who gets to have sex and then gets murdered. You know, I want to be like an adult actor who has adult characters that she gets to play, you know?
But then I think the linchpin is how, like, when Max accidentally spills coffee on her headshots, she, like, yells about how expensive her headshots were, and then she dies.
Which yeah. But also, like, I don't know. It felt real to me in the sense that, like, it'd be very easy to blame her for doing that because that's the moment right before they die.
Yeah.
But if they didn't die right after that, yeah, they have money problems.
Yeah.
That's her primary source of income.
Yeah.
It makes sense to be like, oh shit, those were really expensive.
Well, then
and
why
like, clearly none of them were.
Then why are they at the bottom of the passenger seat? Why aren't they in an envelope in the back or something? I don't know.
Because she just got rejected, and so she put them there.
She's
I don't
upset.
know.
I get it.
As people who are like not doing well financially, it just sort of felt real to me.
Yeah.
But also like something, oh, we're going to blame her for that
Yeah.
because it leads to them, you know, getting in a car crash and her dying. But like, if it didn't, it'd be like, oh shit, those were expensive. That sucks that just happened.
Yeah.
Like, that is a bad thing that just happened.
Yeah.
I understand being upset about it.
Yeah.
She should have been more focused on her driving, but like,
Yeah.
you spill something in cars all the time.
Yeah,
and
they were literally at Max's feet. Like, what did you expect?
I don't know.
Anyway, so Amanda, not great. Nancy,
fine.
So pleasant.
Yeah.
Right?
Nice girl.
A nice girl. Yeah. And so this is kind of where, especially because we see Max interact with Nancy way more than we see her interact with Amanda. Right? Yeah. And so it's... so what I kind of saw, like really just kind of one main theme I saw coming up as I watched it is sort of like the idea of fate and it being inescapable, you know? Like Nancy, she's always talking about how she's the shy girl with the clipboard and the guitar.
Yeah.
Right? And she kind of tries to become the final girl as like we understand throughout the film what that means, and she wants to be the final girl. Yeah. She wants a bigger part.
Technically, she's qualified for it because she's a virgin still.
Okay, great.
Which apparently is the only qualification you need.
In this movie, yeah.
But, like, it just doesn't happen for her, and Max needs to accept it almost more than Nancy does.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because Max can't really see a difference between Nancy and her mom, which is fair. They have the same face.
They really, really
but
do.
Seem like they have very different mannerisms, but... it is interesting those first, 2 minutes or whatever we get where Amanda doesn't come across as like, not the most responsible mom. Right. She seems loving. And they have a song that they sing together and it's very sweet. And I actually love that. Size. That's cute that they have a song. It's like a mom and a daughter. Like, I love that, and they seem to really care about each other. But also, like, it's weird to set up their dynamic as this one where, like, Amanda's really kind of, like, irresponsible and Nancy always has to be, like, in charge. And then to later be like, and Max loves her mom so much. She can't, God, how am I saying this?
Right.
It would have been like, I feel like another movie might have shown like this really perfect loving relationship that's like perfect in every way, and like no wonder Max is all sad and like idealizes her mom or something. But it's like kind of more interesting that's like we saw Amanda had a lot of flaws and Max still idolizes her and sees her as perfect, and then gets to have this version of her mom who is kind of perfect,
right? Because
she is just this shy girl who's like really nice. She gets like a perfect version of her mom who's like younger and hasn't gone through all the hardships that her mom has gone through.
Because also she's a movie version.
Well, yeah, right? So she doesn't actually have a personality beyond being shy and nice.
Yeah.
And kind of gullible.
Yeah.
And sort of eager to please people.
Yeah.
Like, of course you would kind of prefer that and want that as your mom.
So, you know what really stood out to me about Max is that she's failing classics.
Yeah.
That was interesting to me.
For a specific reason?
Well, it's interesting that she's in a class called Classics.
As a high school senior?
Yes.
Did you have a hard time believing that? I did not realize that these were high schoolers at first.
Are they supposed to be high schoolers?
We know they are.
Okay.
Because Vicky starts talking about her safety schools.
That's true. You're right.
How like Stanford or whatever is her safety school.
Safety school because of all the Adderall.
And I was like, these are high schoolers?
These are high schoolers.
I assumed they were like, I thought maybe that first shot we had of, mom and daughter was like, maybe when Max was like in high school, and now we're 3 years later and she's like a little bit into college.
And she's into,
they are like high school seniors.
Yeah.
These people?
Those people. Yep.
Bjorn from Vikings is in high school?
I don't get it.
Oh, he's the guy who plays Chris.
Yeah. Because he's very blonde. Yes.
Yes, he's very blonde. He was in Vikings. He was the buffest guy.
So, well, it's interesting because, like, she seems to be a senior in high school, and she seems to just be, like, this one class away. She just needs to pass classics. And then Chris is helping her out.
I have lots of thoughts about this.
Right, especially the scene where Chris like makes Max retell the tale of Persephone.
Yes.
And then do you have a lot of thoughts on the version of the story she tells?
About how it's wrong?
Yes, my notes say tale of Persephone incorrectly told.
Yeah, I mean the first thing that they do wrong is, well, what did you notice? How did you know it was wrong? Right.
Well, Max says that like Persephone's the daughter of Zeus, which is true.
That is true. Though she doesn't have a relationship with Zeus in any meaningful way. Completely leaves out her mother, interestingly. More on that later.
Yep. And that she eats a pomegranate and then is, I believe she uses the term kidnapped by Zeus and led into Hades.
Yeah.
And led into the underworld.
Yeah.
And basically told like, don't look back or you'll die.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, that is not my understanding of the tale of Persephone.
No. It gets things out of order.
Yes.
Like, why is she eating a pomegranate before she gets to the underworld? That's not how that works.
Oh, see, now, it was my understanding that okay, so Persephone does eat a pomegranate in the underworld.
Yeah, she eats
7 seeds.
Yes.
So she has to stay in the underworld for 7 months.
That's a common, yeah.
And
That's
the
common
idea is
version of
like
the myth.
that's winter, and when she's
kind of like, because with
Yeah.
same as like with the Fae, once you partake of the food of the underworld, you're stuck
Part
there.
of it, yeah.
You become part of it. So
Yeah.
like that's how she gets stuck in the underworld. It has nothing to do with her not looking back. I mean, it is true. And it's funny that comes from Chris, that part, who is supposedly the one who's good at.
who knows classics.
But he's like totally mixing
Yeah.
it up because he is right that Hermes actually goes down to get Persephone out of the underworld.
That tracks, yeah.
But there's nothing about them not having to look back. He is getting that confused with Orpheus and Eurydice.
Oh,
That's the story.
He's just getting his underworld tales confused.
Yeah, Orpheus and Eurydice is the story
This is funny
where
because I'm literally going to see Hades Town tonight.
Oh.
That's the tale
of
is
Orpheus and Eurydice. Yeah, a lot of people know the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. It's kind of popular, as is Hades and Persephone.
Yeah.
That's the one where Orpheus and Eurydice it's like their wedding day, and Eurydice gets like bit by a poisonous snake and dies.
Yeah.
Super tragic. And Orpheus is like the one man mortal ever to go down to the underworld and like return still alive.
Through the power of love and music.
Yeah. And he like plays a song that, Hades and Persephone, because they are king, queen of the underworld, decide is so beautiful that they're like, okay, fine, you can have your wife back, but you can't look at her until you get out of the underworld. And so that's where that whole like, don't turn back, don't look,
turn
because
back,
he's leading the way with Eurydice behind him. And I will say I did get sort of like Orpheus and Eurydice vibes from this story in general, because it's like Max wants to go to the underworld to get her loved one back. That's kind of what she's doing with Nancy. She's like, maybe if I keep Nancy alive, I can bring her with me back to the real world. And that doesn't end up happening.
Yeah.
But also,
We can live in the valley.
yes. Oh, babies.
Oh, sweeties, yeah.
But also, the main thing that they leave out of the Persephone myth is that they call it like the myth of Hades and Persephone a lot. Like those are the top billed because that's like the quote unquote love story and or abduction story. But like the real love story in my mind is about Persephone and Demeter, her mom. That's like, this is the story about a mom and a daughter who miss each other. There's a reason why I perseverated on it when I was in college, my first year, and wrote my thesis about it. And it's interesting that they leave that detail, like they pointedly leave that detail out. They mention that she's a daughter of Zeus. They don't mention that
she's also a daughter of Demeter.
Yeah, and they don't mention the fact that the reasons why we have the seasons, when Persephone gets kidnapped or whatever happens with Hades, and taken to the underworld, the reason why we have winter is because Demeter was so upset about it, she stopped allowing plants to grow.
Yeah.
She was just like, I'm done.
7 months
Everybody
her
else
kids in
can
the
die.
underworld. Yeah.
Everybody else can die until I have my daughter back. And like Zeus was not helping her. And eventually he was like,
never
okay,
does.
everybody's dying. So, and I like the mortals. So I guess,
they worship me.
I guess I'll let Hermes go down and get her. And like, she gets to come back, but there's the deal where she's only back. And that's like why we have spring, because this mom and daughter are so happy to be reunited that like the entire earth flourishes.
Yeah.
Like that is the story to me.
And we leave that out of a story where the main plot line is the relationship between a mother and daughter.
Yeah, it's like so specifically done.
Max, this is why you're failing classics.
I know.
And she doesn't even make the connection. I wonder, like, did you even read the story, Max? Why are you
know.
failing classics?
I know. I would see that story so resonating with her. It's a story about a mom's grief
And
for her
this is-
daughter, and her daughter trying desperately to get back to her mom.
And so that's interesting because in my notes for Max, I wrote down that this character is kind of boring to me. I think her motivation is really one-dimensional.
That she just kind of...
She just wants her mom back, but like... just can't see like beyond her own nose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, God, you're naive.
Well, I think she starts out in this place where she's just one of those classic characters often start out just being really stuck, just sort of stuck in place, not really changing or evolving in any way because she hasn't really moved on past that moment when her mom died.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I find it interesting that her journey only begins because she makes almost a like kind of deal with the devil almost of like agreeing to go to that double feature that Duncan wants her to go to because he promises to do all of her classics homework.
Yeah.
And it's like she is like basically selling her like integrity or whatever and like agreeing to subject herself to a bunch of trauma that she's been avoiding for 3 years.
On an anniversary, which is always hard.
Just so that she won't fail this one class that like she could study and do the work for, and also has people willing to study with her.
Or take like a fucking credit recovery class over the summer, girl.
Yeah, and it's like, it's this one class.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just sort of like,
do they make the seniors take classics?
I mean, some high schools
some high
have
schools.
classics as like a specific of
You
literature.
have to take it.
I think
yeah.
even actually at our high school, when you weren't in, because we had a different sort of
Yeah, we
program,
had our own curriculum.
there was a classics class.
That tracks. I mean, but we also read like fucking Gilgamesh.
I mean, we kind of did classics. we just didn't call it that.
And Odyssey.
Yeah.
Which we don't do anymore, by the way.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, no,
so-
I was just like, I was like, she has these people who are like helping her succeed in a way where she would not have to subject herself to seeing her mom again.
Yeah.
Which seems like something she's been avoiding, but she agrees to do it anyway just to get out of that work, which is like an interesting characterization for her that's never really connected
Explained
to anything
further.
else. They
Yeah.
just need her to go on this journey.
Yeah.
But I also did sort of think about how like in horror movies, like the people who are going to be the sacrifice, they always have to choose.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
that classic thing of like they have to make the choice.
Yeah.
That is outlined in Cabin in the Woods. This felt like very much one of those moments where it's like she chose to put herself in this position when she really didn't need
She
to.
didn't need to. Yeah.
She could have made a different choice, and she didn't.
So, but anyway, this is all to say that the relationship between Max and Nancy is incredibly flirtatious.
I got the vibe a little bit
Yeah.
here and there.
Well, because Max knows that Nancy is her mom.
Yeah.
But Nancy doesn't. And so, like, they're talking and Nancy's being nice because she's nice and,
Yeah.
like, getting to know Max. And Max is, like, making eyes at her, basically.
Well, and being like, don't have sex with that man.
Yeah. Or,
You'll die.
or like when Nancy is lamenting how, you know, she doesn't feel special. Like, is it just her role to be the shy girl with the clipboard and the guitar, right? Or could she be more, right?
Yeah.
And Max is like, you're special to me, Nancy.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, she's like, you're the most
Okay.
amazing. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very, to talk about a different classic, very Oedipal.
yes, very. Electra.
Yes.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, it's
So-
interesting.
And then, yeah, like, you know, it just like keeps going throughout the film. Like Max is like, you can come live with me in the valley.
Oh, and that whole scene where they're talking about that, they're like in the treehouse, or they're somewhere, or they're up above somewhere setting up the arrows or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, they're getting ready for the
But they
attack.
have like a tarp pulled down, so it has this kind of like mood lighting, this sort of like, not like mood lighting, but it sort of feels like otherworldly.
Yeah.
This sort of different ambiance that like kind of sets them apart from the rest of the world for a moment, where they
Yeah.
get to live in this fantasy.
Yeah.
That's like very pointed of like they're in this other realm
Yeah.
together, just the two of them.
And then by the end of the movie, they're saying they love each other.
Yeah.
And also, which
Which makes sense for Max, but I'm like, Nancy, girl, you just met her.
Yeah.
But also that happens at a summer camp.
it's true, summer camps are a special liminal space.
Yeah.
Well, and also, what really gets me, it like is kind of in one of my like good comedy moments is, spoiler alert, Nancy does die at the end.
Yes.
She sacrifices herself.
Yeah, because they
right?
realize
Yeah.
basically that if Max is going to live, she has to actually be the singular final girl. There is no such thing as final girls.
Yeah.
They come to, though I did have a moment where I was like, Chris is still alive. How come Chris doesn't count? Because he's a boy?
Yeah.
What's that about?
Oh, Chris is totally a final boy to me.
I know. I was like, there's another person. I don't know that Nancy needed to
But
die.
of course, Chris doesn't. Oh, Chris does make it.
Yeah.
Till the end, when the ends up, the credits roll, which I loved, by the way.
I know, and they watch the credits.
They watch the credits come up over the sunrise.
I love that moment too in the flashback.
Yeah.
Where they just sort of walk over the little
Summer of 57 or
yeah,
whatever.
the little placard that says it.
And then the movie ends, the reel ends, and then it ends because it's a double feature, so the sequel starts.
Yeah.
And Chris is okay.
Yeah.
So technically, Max and Chris could be considered our final
Yeah, so I
girls.
was like, so then why does Nancy have to die?
But Nancy has to die. I don't know, but she does. And
Because
so she does the thing Tina does, but not as well. The strip tease to get Billy.
Yeah.
But she's like, turns around and looks at Max
She's
while
doing
she does it.
a sexy dance for her daughter.
For Max.
Who she doesn't really, who she now knows is her daughter, sort of.
Yeah, they kind of spilled the beans.
She knows that Max sees her as her mother.
Yeah.
I guess is a way you could put it.
Yeah.
And she does it to Betty Davis Eyes.
Yes, their
which, as we
song.
mentioned, is their song.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of a interesting song to be a mother-daughter song.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because it's like, she's so awesome and hot.
Yeah, right. And unapproachable and untouchable.
Which, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess you could call your mom that.
Okay. Yeah.
Or your daughter.
Yeah.
that.
Max and Nancy just have a really interesting relationship for knowing that they're like actually mother and daughter.
But not also.
But not, yeah.
Yeah. It gets a little complicated. It gets a little juicy.
Yeah. So it's just interesting.
But yeah, so much of it is just a setup for Max to accept that that Nancy has to die because her mom already did die.
Yes.
And she needs to accept her grief.
Yeah.
She needs to like feel her grief and accept it and move on from it. That's really all it is. It's just a setup for her emotional character arc.
Yep. That's okay.
And that's the only reason really Nancy has to die. But I guess other than because she needs to die in the movie. But even the final girl, Paula, dies.
I love Paula.
I know. Paula sounds like a great final girl.
I want to talk about Paula, but I want to talk about Max's friends first.
Yeah, let's talk about Max's friends first.
So
the ones who are apparently high schoolers.
We talked about Gertie.
Yeah, so her main friends, she has her best friend Gertie.
Yeah.
Who's kind of our comic relief.
Yeah.
Kind of, I guess, in the fool role. She's not like dumb, but she's the comic relief.
She's
More than, I mean, everybody is funny because this movie is a comedy, but Gertie's only role is to be funny. She really has no other reason for being around.
She doesn't really have like anything that develops her as a character other than for us to know that she's no longer a virgin.
Yeah.
Right.
Meanwhile, her stepbrother, she pointedly says stepbrother, Duncan. He's also, a funny side character, but he has a role in the film, which is A, to get Max to go to this double future and begin her journey, and B, to have information about what happens in the movie. Like, hey, that's Paula the final girl.
Yeah.
And like, that's what Kurt's like. That's what Nancy's like. You know, he like knows all the people.
Yeah, because he's seen the movie a million times.
And he knows the rules. He knows exactly when these people are going to die, where, and all of that
and
stuff.
then it makes it funny that he dies first.
Because you don't normally have a scholar die first, but
And then, I don't know, I think Vicky is pretty funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we ready for me to just talk about Vicky for a moment?
Let's talk about Vicky for a moment.
Because current Mean Girls, who used to be the main character's best friend, is like one of my favorite archetypes.
Ooh.
It's a weirdly specific archetype that comes up a lot.
In YA, probably.
Yes. Which, I love.
Yeah.
But it's definitely more of like a YA thriller than like a slasher thing.
Yeah.
But like, Vicky is like one of those, there's something about the mean girl who is weirdly so developed in like all the little things that they say or do that are like quote unquote jokes that when you think about it, you're like, oh my God. Like Gertie's, the first thing we hear about her is Gertie saying that she's writing, poems that sound like suicide notes. I'm like, that's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
That is something you would joke about in high school.
Yes.
But looking back, I'm concerned about.
Probably take more seriously.
Like, when she runs into her ex-boyfriend Chris hanging out with Max.
Yes.
She's like obsessively talking about all the great things that she's doing in a way that's like, oh, you're super insecure and sad. You're just insecure, and like she's just popping Adderall like candy. Like, oh my God, instant favorite character. I will protect you with my life. So nobody deserves you.
So I did actually like Vicky, especially when they all come together and realize what kind of situation they're in, right? And they know that there needs to be a final girl, and Vicky just stands up and nominates herself.
Yes.
And did you notice that she's wearing a white top when she says that?
Oh,
yeah, white top with like kind of red bows or something happening with it. And so, I just thought that was really funny. And she does have the moment where she gets real and she's like, Max, we were friends. Like,
Yeah.
But
she has that apology moment with Gertie even where she's like, Gertie, I was the one who said this thing about you. And Gertie's like, oh, well, I said this other thing about you.
Yeah.
And they were just sort of like, respect. But we're both mean girls.
It's interesting, though, because, like, Vicky and Max apparently used to have a closer relationship. And it's interesting because Vicky is, like, kind of blaming her mom's death, Max's mom's death, on, like, their growing apart.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's, like, a pretty serious trauma to lose a parent, especially in a way like that. Like, I don't know.
But also,
I know what she's getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I think she does have something specifically where she's like, I'm not trying to make excuses, but you stopped wanting to hang out with me because you were sad.
Yeah.
So we stopped hanging out.
And now I'm sad.
I think that can be true without blame, but
yeah, totally.
I don't know. And of course, she's sort of her and Gertie kind of martyr themselves in the end, where they are gonna get killed. They're stuck. They can't keep running. And but I think Vicky says it first. She's just like, go. Move on. She even before that says like, I'm the mean girl in an 80s slasher.
Yeah.
And I've already made it past like the halfway point.
We're past the halfway point.
I'm not long for this world.
What did she say? She says something specific.
I know. I can't remember. I didn't write it down, but it was good.
something like I'm not welcome here or something. Or
Yeah.
my welcome is wearing thin or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. That she's just sort of not going to be there long. And I do think it's kind of common
How astute.
for the mean girl archetype kind of to martyr themselves in some way as like part of their repentance, I guess, for having
Absolutely.
been a mean girl. Like that's
Absolutely.
something that they need to do even when they're like, in my mind, very sympathetic people whose only crime is being, well, in this case, she spread some gossip. So I guess that's kind of bad. But often that mean girl archetype is just sort of like, she says what she's thinking.
Yeah.
And she's not actually, she just doesn't take shit from people.
Yeah, and maybe she's also like, I also kind of think about a mean girl as like usually being born into money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can often be a thing too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know. I have such a soft spot for mean girl characters because I'm like, I understand you.
But what happened to you, mean girl?
Oh,
Why
yeah.
are you like
Why
this?
are you like this?
Yeah.
And why are you being forced to redeem yourself beyond the amount of harm that you have caused?
Exactly.
Why are they forcing you to go through so much shit?
Yeah, why do you have to die to repent for being a little bit of a bully?
Yeah,
you know?
you and Gertie, I guess, had to die for bullying each other.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, and so I think in that way it kind of brings it back to the slasher essence. You know, like that's definitely something that happens in a slasher. People have to like
Yeah, they have to die.
they have to
They
die.
deserve their death.
And that yes, they have to transgress, and Vicky has transgressed.
I do think that
She's
that
had
gets
sex.
kind of interesting when we get to like how Max's friends sort of interact with the people we'll talk about in a bit, the actual characters of the Camp Bloodbath movie, where all of those characters really do kind of fit those archetypes we love to talk about. Like it's pretty clear who the whore is and the virgin and the
fool. Yep.
athlete guy, and you know all of that is pretty clear. And then you kind of have them pair off, and we have like Vicky hanging out with Tina, where it's clear they're sort of conflating the mean girl with the whore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but those aren't the same thing.
They're not the same, yeah.
And either way, neither of them done anything to deserve dying.
Yeah.
Hey, it's misogyny.
But it's an 80s slasher. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just sort of based on her being sort of like stuck in the horror role, and how we've already kind of talked about Duncan as the scholar.
Yes.
Do you have archetypes for her other friends too? Like I said, I think Gertie is probably the fool because there's
probably
nothing
a
else she
fool.
does.
You know, I really do think that Chris is the final boy.
Yeah. I feel like we're supposed to think he's the athlete or like the jock or whatever because
Yeah.
he's huge.
He's a big guy.
He's just a big guy.
Yeah.
But he also has kind of scholar vibes. He's there to help her with her classics homework.
That's true. But so is Duncan, right?
Yeah, but Duncan also has a lot of fool vibes. So
It's
it gets
true.
a little confusing, but maybe that's because they're not really horror characters.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I do think it comes down to Chris sort of being the final boy who's also a jock.
Yeah, definitely. Well, because what he does, I think maybe something that would put him in the athlete camp is that he is like the only one who actually stands up to Kurt when Kurt is being an absolute moron.
And him and Kurt being the clear athlete jock
Yes.
character.
Yeah.
Are sort of paired with each other in the same way that Vicky and Tina the whore are paired
Yeah.
together. Like they're meant to be sets.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's the athlete. He's the one. Yeah, he fully puts Kurt in like a headlock or something.
Yeah.
Some equivalent to
And
that.
then it's funny because then we find out that Chris has two dads, and that's so cute. And Kurt like doesn't understand because it's the 80s to him.
Yeah.
And he's like, two dudes can't have kids.
Yeah, he has all they could do is like go to clubs and bone and like
it's a great lifestyle.
yeah, he's like weirdly not homophobic.
Yeah.
Only because of that.
He's like, actually, seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would love to be gay.
So he really is the one who like actually stands up and puts Kurt in his place after like the entire movie of him just saying idiotic shit.
Yeah,
you know?
calling girls like fun bags and
Yeah,
dumb
right.
shit like that.
Calling himself a cherry thief.
Oh,
Gross. Hate it.
no, everything about him sucks.
Yeah. So in that way, to me, he's a fool. But I can also understand.
I feel like that's the jock archetype though, is being overly aggressive with his sexuality.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But he's also clearly played for laughs because now in our modern eyes, that kind of character is hilariously pathetic.
Yeah. Right.
But they wouldn't have been seen that way back then.
Yeah.
In the same way.
Right. Like, remember when we watched Sleepaway Camp?
Yes.
And like how mean all those boys were to each other and how scantily clad they were.
Yeah.
Right.
But
with
it's
their
like
crop tops.
they're the ideal masculine but form. What do you
Yes,
want?
absolutely.
Yeah. That was kind of the vibes I got from Kurt.
With their crop tops
But
and their short shorts.
And back to Chris as the athlete. I do also think he's the only one that kind of gets involved in like, other than our final girls, who of course need to get involved in like combat with our killer.
Yeah.
You know, he's the only one who also gets kind of up close and personal with the killer. And
Chris?
Yes. And takes a lot of bodily damage.
Yes.
In the way that athletes also often do.
Yeah, good point.
So I do think he is our athlete.
Okay, yeah.
But anything else about Chris in general? He is also our love interest.
Yeah, and I just really like the way that, like, I don't think they ever really explicitly state it in the movie, but he really is a final boy. Like, he does last till the end, and, like, there are final boys. They're rare, but they exist.
Yeah.
And, like...
Yeah, we've watched movies where that happens.
What I asked myself, when I was watching it's like the movie is called The Final Girls.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, so who are the final girls?
Yeah.
And I was like, Nancy, Max, and Chris.
Right.
All
and
three
honestly,
of them together are the final girls.
Not Nancy.
And then not Nancy,
last.
because she dies.
And maybe alternatively, Paula, who is the final girl of the movie, because she is technically explicitly a final girl.
In the film.
Original film.
In Camp Bloodbath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because they fuck things up doesn't mean, I think, that you need to take that away, because it's not like it's the killer that takes her down. It's
the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
randomly
thought
exploding.
that was hilarious. It exploded like 3 times. And so I was still, the first time I watched it, I was like still kind of like in that idea of like inescapable fates.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what if Paula is fine? What if she...
she just pops up because
she
she's
can't
the
die
final girl.
She's the final girl.
I would have loved that.
And then we realized that that's not the movie we're in anymore. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But Paula's very interesting character.
Do we want to move on from Max's friends and start talking about the characters of Camp Bloodbath?
Yeah.
Yeah. Paula, I think, is the character we get
very little of.
Yeah, because she dies. I mean, I guess
she shows up late.
Yeah, she shows up late, and then she dies pretty quickly.
Pretty quick. Yeah, we see her, like, we get like 2 scenes from her. So she has very interesting final girl energy. And
we do get some of her from the original movie.
That's true.
Because we get we get like the trailer.
Yeah.
And we hear her with her famous last words, or, words against Billy Murphy.
Yeah,
when
she actually does face him. Yeah.
You messed with the wrong virgin, which of course Max repeats later when she fights him, because that's what final girls have to say in this movie.
Because now she's the final girl.
The wrong virgin.
So when I first watched it, I thought Paula had very interesting final girl energy, and like maybe that's because she's not the final girl.
Yeah, but she's like such a little rebel.
She's super gay, right? She's a lesbian, right?
I don't know.
Like so I'm gonna stereotype here, but like she's super into cars.
Okay.
Right? And like motorcycles. Like, doesn't she come up in the car and she's smoking? She's like, did I miss the Kumbaya circle?
See, I thought she was just a bad girl, kind of like a pink lady,
She does have a conversation with, I don't remember, like Vicky or somebody, and she's talking about how like she can't wait to like spend part of her summer like souping up some kind of car.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like she has that final girl asexuality where she's just kind of like not interested in boys. Yes. She's not a virgin for like...
So she's probably...
For being like pure and good. She's a virgin because she's just kind of not interested. She's got better things to do.
She's a virgin because she's not interested in sex with men.
Yeah, it's not like she like resisted temptation and thus is like this pure and good thing. It's like because...
That's my headcanon. Paula's a lesbian.
Okay, I love it. I support her.
Yeah, of course, always.
In another world, her and Nancy could have been in love. Who knows?
I would have loved that.
Yeah.
But Nancy decides to have sex with Kurt instead.
Which also felt very... compet. Like she has no interest in Kurt. Kurt just is the first guy to show interest in her.
Yeah, right. And also interest in a gross way.
Yeah.
Like he's calling himself a cherry thief, Nancy. Run. Right. Very far away from this man.
She just seems so like, because she's written that way, so naive.
Yes, yeah.
She needs to be easily seduced by this guy.
Yeah.
Because that's like what's hot.
And I think she also
makes her ready to die.
Again, in Camp Bloodbath, I think Nancy is a character who is someone who is interested in having sex. Like she shows up and she's like, this summer's gonna change my life. Right?
She wants to be somebody who has had sex.
Yeah.
She does not want to have sex, if that makes sense.
Yes.
She wants to be someone who has experienced that and is no longer a virgin.
Yes.
But she's not really interested in the process of that.
Yes.
Which was very like compulsive heterosexuality or like very asexual of her.
Yeah.
Of just being like, I know this is a thing I have to do so that I can be like a mature, hot woman now.
Yeah.
And not just some kid anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, there's other...
But Kurt, though?
Yeah. Why not the nice guy who loves New Wave?
Blake.
Yeah,
I
seems
loved
sweet.
Blake. Blake actually had one of my favorite lines that I kind of wanted to be one of our end lines, but it's also a question, which is like when they're all together, right? The groups have mixed up, and they're kind of telling the movie characters
like,
that they're
hey,
in
you're
a movie.
a movie.
And Blake is having a hard time, as they all are.
Existential crisis.
That's fair. And I love that Blake's first question is New Wave real?
Yes. And I love Gertie like, of course New Wave is.
Of course it's real.
He's like, okay, I can accept me not being real, but New Wave, that's sacred.
Blake is great. And Blake and Gertie do kind of have a little bit of a connection
which
there.
made me think that maybe in the original movie, he's the fool.
Oh, maybe.
I mean, he does seem like...
Is it because he likes New Wave?
Well, I'm just thinking he's probably a bit of the outsider character.
Is it because he's black?
Yes.
Yeah.
In an 80s slasher movie.
He's the only
because he's the only black person. And also because he's like a little bit dainty. He's got like an ear, not in like a gay way, but in like the 80s glam way.
He's wearing suspenders with a lot of buttons on them.
And which has like a little earring on
one earring. Yeah.
It's giving that, giving New Wave. It's giving just sort of being alternative.
Yeah.
Alternative culture, which I think is very full.
For an 80s.
Full archetype of being a little bit on the outside of the like popular crowd.
Totally.
Where he's kind of got his own thing going on. He doesn't really care what other people think about him.
Yeah. And we don't really get to see him like partake in any like decadence, like any substance use or drinking.
And I don't know if New Wave is a culture that is known for any certain drugs. Because I don't know enough about New Wave.
I mean, every culture has its subcultures,
but I don't know. But I just don't know if there is a stereotype for that. But it does seem like... But he does get paired up with Gertie, who I also think is sort of playing a fool. So I think
that's true.
I could see in the original when the normal movie was going in its normal way.
Yeah.
I bet that was the role that he played.
Yeah.
That's just sort of the vibe I got from him. Because like Gertie, he doesn't really have any purpose to be there other than to make a few jokes.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even make that many jokes.
No, he just loves New Wave.
He just loves, like, what else do we know about him? And he seems nice to Gertie.
Yeah.
And they'd be cute, I'm sure.
Yeah. But they die.
And he has a lot of pins.
The other one is Kurt. I feel like we've kind of already talked about Kurt.
I do think, I
do really appreciate, I've always thought his name was Adam Devine.
Yeah?
You said it a different way.
Did I?
I thought so.
I don't know how to pronounce things.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure it's Adam
Devine.
I
said Adam Devine. Did I say Adam Devine or something weird?
Devine or something. Yeah, anyway. I think it's Devine. Adam, reach out. I do kind of like
I was probably thinking of Adam Levine.
Adam Levine. For Maroon 5? Yeah. No.
And it made me pronounce it weird as Adam Devine.
Adam Devine. I do like Adam Devine. I think that he's pretty talented. He's very good in The Righteous Gemstones.
I've heard that.
He's very good.
I've not seen it, but I've heard. I actually have not seen a lot of things that he's in, but he's been a side character.
Yeah.
He's shown up in like cameo roles.
Yes.
Because he's known enough as a comedic actor that he'll show up in things.
He could totally be a character.
And apparently, him and the actress playing Paula fell in love during this movie and they're married now.
I love that.
Like to this day.
I love that.
Isn't that adorable?
That's too cute. I love it.
Yeah, I love that a lot of because after the credits roll and then they're in a sequel and then the real credits roll, we get like a bunch of bloopers, which is a lost art.
The blooper reel is a lost art. You are right.
So many of them are Duncan's character.
Yes.
And
being silly. Yeah.
And Kurt's character because I think they were the ones who ad-libbed the most.
Yes, absolutely.
But a lot of them specifically are Kurt and Paula in the car.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah, where he's saying things like, oh, you just killed that guy. Maybe we should make out about it, and like all these shit. He just like has all these shit, and I'm like, oh, they fell in love in that car. That's actually really sweet.
Yeah,
think about.
So I do really like. I think Adam Devine is a fantastic casting choice for this.
Oh yeah,
kind
he
of
does
role.
wonderfully in this role.
He does so good,
and he keeps it sort of funny and pathetic rather than feeling scary. I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Like you can see right through him that like, oh, he's actually just super insecure.
Yeah, and he's just a fucking idiot.
Yeah,
like you're not like. And since Nancy gets, quote unquote, saved from him.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
That it makes him less. It just makes him sort of like a harmless.
And I really, again, his death had so much promise. Like the being flown from the car, love it.
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate that the effects were so ineffective.
It is one of those classic athlete moves where his body takes insane amounts of damage compared to everybody else.
That's true.
Like, he gets scrunched.
Yeah, and like his legs are like backwards.
Yeah,
and,
it's clearly just meant to be a silly visual gag.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, and then Paula blows up. R.I.P. Paula.
Yeah, Paula. The life you could have lived.
We kind of already talked about Tina.
Yeah, we did.
What else about Tina?
So obviously, Kurt and Duncan are both, and Gertie are all being played by like pretty well-known comedic actors.
Yeah.
I don't know the person playing Tina, but her comedy chops, so good. I love
her
the
name
way
is Angela Trimber.
I might have to look more into her
Trimber.
because the way that she. Like talking about how she's not allowed to do her striptease because that'll make Billy Murphy come out and kill everybody.
Yeah.
When she's like, "Why does he hate my boobs?"
And I'm like, "Girl, great question."
I know, that was literally what I put in my notes. I was like, "That is a good question. You should be asking that
These are
question."
the critical thinking questions we need to
Yes,
ask.
especially when you're the horror slasher. Yeah, like come on. And it's not because they're too small, Tina.
And
You're
also,
perfect.
I think I mean, you're the one with much more acting experience between the two of us. But like, I do think that it is a special skill to be able to act as if you are under the influence.
Yes.
Like when she's hopped up on Adderall, like that
she is very.
She hits so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the way that, you know, when I think Vicky tells her to focus, she like stares at her and kind of like moves her head but won't break eye contact. It's
and there's
so
the
funny.
part where she gets kind of like distracted because a fly goes by and she stays. Apparently that was a real fly that drove by and she like just ad-libbed that reaction that she has to it and like stayed in character so well that made it like one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, flowers for Tina.
Yeah. And I guess to do the striptease, she had to drink like, she shot like 4 Red Bulls in a row or something like that.
God, why, Tina?
Because she was like, I need energy to do this.
Right, because
to the degree that Tina would do this.
That Tina has been wanting to take off her clothes for hours, and she has not been
so
able
much
to.
Adderall.
And she's on Adderall.
And it's just so frenetic.
Yeah.
And like not sexy.
It's funny it's funny because she takes off the mittens first, right?
Yes.
And then she kind of dances for a while she's still wearing the life preserver.
It's just so silly. I love her.
And it's like, wouldn't you want to take that off? And then, and then like the kind of like fear and like panic in her eyes when she's like, it's time, I'm taking my top off, I'm gonna show my boobs, Billy's coming. It's funny.
And then she dies so quickly.
But she dies very quickly, but not because of Billy.
Yeah.
She falls on the bear trap.
Yes. She just gets
because she was too hopped up on Adderall
and just got too scared and just didn't stick to the plan. And she just there were too many booby traps.
I love it.
I do think that's kind of a more comedy way to take the horror archetype is to play her as like the ditzy dumb blonde character, which you don't actually see them in horror movies that way. The horror character is normally more of like a wry kind of mean girl temptress kind of character.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
So I loved Tina. Tina, top marks.
Yeah, flowers for Tina.
Flowers for Tina.
And then really, there's only one other character to talk about, and that is our psycho killer.
Yes,
Billy Murphy. Who we really get, like, it's basically a ripoff of the Friday the 13th origin story.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
That was my vibe.
A different, like, a version of that. And
I think there was, I don't know how familiar you are with specifically summer camp slashers, but apparently there is one also that has, like, almost that exact story about somebody being bullied.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And then going back. Yeah, I don't remember which one it was. But apparently it was like there was like a specific reference.
The sheer number of slashers that were made in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And that like many of them would have to fall under like the sleepaway camp, summer camp subgenre of slasher.
Especially since Friday the 13th was such a hit.
Yeah, in the very early 80s.
Yeah.
And almost immediately just start popping out one almost every single year.
Yeah.
So I don't know specifically what movie that is, but I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so he's clearly a pastiche in the way that a lot of these things are. He's just the archetype sort of distilled down to like, he got hurt by camp counselors. So now he's going to come back all the time and kill camp counselors. And he's almost supernaturally strong and resilient.
And he has a machete.
And a weird mask.
And a weird mask. That's Jason, actually literally my one question is like, what's with that mask?
Okay.
It's a weird mask.
I thought, because it seems to me like carved wood.
Really? Okay.
I thought it was sort of like, a face on like a totem pole or like a tiki kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, it is.
Which gave kind of summer camp vibes
Sure.
when you were fine with the cultural appropriation of it.
Right, yeah. Especially in...
80s summer camp.
Oh my gosh, in Friday the 13th, like there's I can't remember his name, but there's a character in the original Friday the 13th that like for half the movie is just wearing like a feathered headband, headdress.
Just as fashion.
For no reason.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So I got
so maybe
that
something like that.
vibe,
Okay, sure.
That it was like, he cut it off the front of the totem pole or whatever.
It kind of reminded me of the I don't know what they're called, but they're in Mario, and like they're the big blocks that come up and thwomp down.
Oh yeah.
Are they thwomps?
Maybe.
No. But they kind of got that face,
Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
People are upset that we don't know what they're called, but
Yeah, I don't care.
but they thwomp.
Yeah, the thwomps. Yeah, my main thing for Billy is like, what's up with that mask? Like, because there's the thing about Jason.
Yeah.
Is that he doesn't get his hockey mask until halfway through the third film.
Right.
So they just kind of give Billy a mask because he's not the main character,
And 'cause he's
right?
supposed
But
to.
I just wish that...
Well, I think there are things that maybe get developed in Camp Bloodbath 2, Cruel Summer,
Right.
that perhaps elucidate on that a bit.
Because, I mean, we literally just talked about slasher sequels, right?
Yeah.
Like, something that happens in a sequel is that
You
we get more
that,
lore.
Yeah, you get that backstory.
Well, maybe...
That explains things. You know why the guy wants revenge, but you don't really know who he was before he wanted revenge until the sequel. Or things like that.
His motivations are for the choices he makes
Yeah.
to seek revenge.
My main thought that I had with Billy is that when they initiate the flashback sequence the second time as a way to like save themselves, give themselves a breather.
Yeah, super smart.
I was like, I would have immediately tried to save young Billy from going into there. Like, no hesitation, because when I see older kids bullying a younger kid, I react.
Are they able to interact?
I don't know, but I should want to fucking try.
Yeah.
And also, it breaks the movie canon, which just seems like something that I would be trying to do in that moment. And it just sort of made me think, like, what would this movie be like if instead of this, like, grief metaphor thing they're doing, if instead, like, empathy was the point, where it's like, what if the point wasn't ensuring that, like, one person, one final girl survived, or that, like, your mom survived or whatever, but instead that everyone, including the psycho killer, like, survived and thrived. Like, what if we just imagined a better world, you know?
Yeah, right.
Like, wouldn't that be an interesting movie? If we go back in time and stop the psycho killer from being the psycho
Becoming a
killer,
psycho killer.
and then everybody's fucking saved.
Yeah.
Like, stop the violence at its root before it can cascade.
Yeah. But, I mean, we talked about this literally last episode, right? The way that in the slasher film, especially ones that are, taking their inspiration from the 80s.
Yes.
Like, there is sort of like the moral superiority of like the psycho killer who might be morally impure or heaven forbid disabled.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like,
yeah, there's some reason that isn't really specified of why Billy is picked on.
Yeah.
He's different in some way.
Yeah.
That sort of does seem to imply some sort of like disability.
And that he must become this like harbinger of evil.
Yeah,
and
this
death,
avenger.
The avenger, in order for these young people to... that the psycho killer has its own particular function in punishing the transgressors of the young people in the cast.
Yeah.
So we've been talking for like an hour about how
almost exactly
how this is not a horror or a slasher, but it is actually a comedy. But it is called The Final Girls, right? And we've been kind of over the last few episodes, we've been focusing on movies that are slashers that have a final girl, and we've been talking about it kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And so I just figured...
And the 80s of it all.
And the 80s of it all, yeah. And so I figured I just collected some particular choice bits from Carol J. Clover's journal essay, Her Body Himself.
Right, yes.
Gender in the slasher film. And it's worth noting that this was published in autumn of 1987 in a journal called Misogyny, Misandry, and Misanthropy.
Fuck yeah.
Hell yeah. I would read that journal.
Yeah.
let's remind ourselves. I think I've talked about this on the pod before.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I don't think maybe in this much detail. So,
Yeah.
So the idea of a final girl was created by an American academic who's still alive, by the way, Carol J. Clover. She's alive and kicking. And actually, she is an absolutely fascinating person.
Oh, really?
She is a professor emeritus at UC Berkeley, and her area of interest is actually not sociology or media and horror films. That is not her main research interest. Her research interest is early Scandinavian literature and culture. And old Icelandic language. And then also film history and film theory.
The girl's got layers.
I love it. You go, Carol J. Clover.
Well-rounded.
So she is the one who comes up with this idea of the final girl in her essay, Her Body Himself.
Yes.
So as defined by Carol J. Clover, the final girl is a woman who is the sole survivor of a group of people who are usually young, right? Who are chased by a villain, and the final girl is the one who gets the final confrontation with the villain.
Yes.
So, and she will either kill the villain herself, or she will be saved at the last minute from someone like a police officer, which is actually what happens in Halloween. We haven't covered Halloween, but in the original Halloween, Laurie Strode is rescued by... Is it the doctor? Dr. Loomis or something. So anyway, the final girl is considered, privileged in her ability to survive, usually as a result of her implied moral superiority.
Yes.
Right? So she's not having premarital sex.
Virgin thing.
She's refusing drugs, other behaviors.
Yeah.
Unlike the other people that she's around.
That was another reason why Max agreeing to have Duncan do her homework for her kind of stood out to me. I was like, that is not final girl behavior. Final girls do their homework.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not like Nancy Thompson. You're not into survival. You need to get into survival. Anyway, so according to Clover, the final girl in mini movies, they share very common characteristics, right? The sexual unavailability.
Yes.
Whether that's like actual virginity or maybe only sex within the confines of a, monogamous relationship, monogamous heterosexual relationship, right?
With a wedding ring.
With a wedding ring, yeah. And she avoids those vices like illegal drug use, right? And also according to Carol J. Clover, she does also mention that the final girl often has a unisex name.
Yes.
Like Sydney.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've noticed that. Yeah. And like Max.
Max, yeah.
Yes.
Ash. Yeah. Anyway, so basically, the final girl is the investigating consciousness of the film, right? So she moves the narrative forward. She exhibits intelligence, curiosity, vigilance, and especially usually by the end of the film, she inhabits much more of like the athlete. Like she
is in
acts.
active pursuit. Yep. It's not just like the psycho killer coming for her. She is now coming for him. Yeah. Often at the end of these ones. Yeah. I think a lot of what we just saw with Nancy setting up the traps for Freddy Krueger, being very active and going after him.
Very much so. So one of the basic premises of Clover's theory is that the audience identification is unstable and fluid across gender lines, particularly in the case of a slasher film. So during the final girl's confrontation with the killer, the final girl becomes masculinized. And we've talked about this before.
Yes.
Because she usually takes up a weapon, right? Which is usually something phallic.
Yes.
Phallic appropriation, right?
Because the psycho killer was using it, and he is a symbol of patriarchy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, right? So, and male gaze, right?
Yep.
So like a knife, a chainsaw, a machete.
Yes.
Whatever. So Carol J. Clover goes on to like describe the phenomenon of the audience of horror movies generally being quite male.
Yes.
And usually younger.
Yeah.
That the male audience has to identify with a young female character in like
and
what
that's
is
so hard for men to do.
It's very difficult.
I've heard based on what books sell.
Yes, right. So they have to identify with a young female character in what is ostensibly a male-oriented genre.
Yeah.
Right? That is usually has sadistic voyeurism.
Yeah,
male
the whole
gaze.
time we are sort of, even though we're with the final girl, we get so many shots. Like, we don't get shots from the perspective of the final girl in the way that we do get the shots from the perspective of the psycho killer as he's like stalking the final girl or whoever his next victim is.
Yes.
Like, there is this sort of like way that the audience is the one who wants to watch these people get killed and thinks that they deserve it.
Yes, and
we are definitely meant to align with the psycho killer, but then we also need to suddenly switch it and be okay when the final girl is the one who wins.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know, and there's some sort of weird like, have her kill our worst impulses or our worst tendencies or something.
Yeah.
And be purified by her virginal ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this also just raises some really interesting questions about like the nature of slasher films and the relationship of slasher films and the horror genre in general to feminism.
Yes.
And like how this genre, especially historically, has been very much geared towards men,
Yes.
and again, especially young men.
I wonder how that's changed now.
I also wonder that.
Because I feel like there are a lot of women horror fans now.
Yeah.
And maybe they were always there and just not as vocal about it. Or like
Right.
we didn't know because the internet didn't exist.
Yeah, and also like just the way that like women have to prove that they like something
Yes.
way more.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, you like that band?
Yeah.
You know, like name all their albums. You know, that kind of
Like
thing, you know?
a girl might be like, oh yeah, I like horror movies. And it won't really be taken as like, oh, she's a horror movie fan.
Yeah.
She just likes movies.
Yeah.
So she'll watch whatever.
And sometimes she'll watch a scary one.
Yeah.
So Clover argues that for a film to be successful, it is necessary for the surviving character to be female because she has to experience abject terror. Right?
Yes.
And many viewers would reject the film that showed abject terror on the part of a male.
Yes.
Right?
I think we've talked about this before.
Probably with Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't like to see men in terror.
And so the
It makes us uncomfy.
Yeah, so the terror has a purpose, right? It serves a function. In that the female, if she survives, is purged, what you were just talking about, of undesirable characteristics.
Yes.
Right? Such as like the relentless pursuit of personal pleasure. Like extramarital sex or sex outside of marriage, drug use, that kind of thing. I like the way that, and this is like 1987, right? That Carol J. Clover is watching the early slasher films of the 70s and 80s, right? And she is making this connection that there is an inextricable link between gender and slasher films.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, let's talk about that all day. So I would just love, and then I think Carol J. Clover also writes Men, Women, and Chainsaws in, I think, 91, 92. And I think that's kind of the last time that she published anything about
horror,
these ideas.
Yeah.
And I would just love
to know
what she's thinking now, or like how has this changed since the 90s and the 2000s, right, up to now. Because overall, like, I mean, if we're thinking about what makes a final girl, right, she needs to be sexually unavailable.
Yeah.
Maybe a little naive.
certainly innocent.
Innocent.
In that she's not engaging in the sort of more rebellious
behaviors,
and the more looked down upon behaviors.
Yeah. And she may survive, but no matter what, she's got to go through hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that point about her having to have some sort of like masculinized or like gender ambiguous sort of like moment, at least.
Yeah.
In like the final confrontation, if not throughout the film, I think is also really important.
Yeah.
So that the audience will be able to like relate with her and accept her winning.
Yes.
Over a man.
Over a man.
She must also be sort of mannish.
Yes.
It's like, oh.
Which we talked about last episode with Nancy and Glenn, the way they
like,
do gender wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very that.
Yeah. So this is kind of the criteria for what it takes to be a final girl. And so to what extent does Max and or Chris and or Nancy, maybe even Paula, meet this criteria?
Yeah.
It's tough for Paula. She gets like 2 scenes.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of like what we do know about her in the original Camp Bloodbath. And like we do know that she's sexually unavailable.
Yeah.
Like that's very clear about her.
Yeah.
We know, as you've mentioned, that she is masculinized in many ways.
Yeah.
We know that just from the trailer, we can kind of see that she's been through hell. In that last part, when she's like, you messed with the wrong
version.
like you can see she's been through battle, basically.
Yeah.
So it seems like she was probably set up to be a very classic final girl, and how that doesn't save her when she's no longer in a horror. I mean, she's still in the horror movie, but these people not in a horror movie have come and disrupted the genre.
Yes.
Her final girlness, those traits don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Because like being a virgin isn't the same sort of big deal, I guess maybe. In the 2015s, you know, as it was in the 80s, like it just isn't seen in the same way, maybe. And like being a tomboy is sort of, and like gender is sort of understood differently in 2015. Absolutely. So it's like these things, once this modern lens is put onto Paula, nothing about her is particularly special enough to make her survive.
Yeah, and then it becomes clear that she's probably queer. Which... a lot of final girls and boys.
I mean, you know, I have that theory about Sidney Prescott.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So I just thought she was interesting as like the classic final girl, not really holding up to a modern lens in the same way that, like, yeah, Kurt as like the athlete character, the ideal masculinity does not feel like that to our modern lens.
Yeah,
like these things don't work anymore.
Yeah, he's like worthy of ridicule.
Yeah. And so like we need these new final girls. And yeah, do these new final girls also live up? I mean, Chris, does he exhibit final girl behavior? I know final boys are possible.
Absolutely.
But I'm not sure what he does to be a final girl other than survive.
He does survive.
But he doesn't have a final confrontation or really any kind of relationship with the psycho killer, Billy Murphy.
I thought he got a whack in.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
yeah,
he's not really there for the final confrontation.
That's true. Yeah, because he gets knocked out.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and then he's just there.
He kind of
like
pulls
Dewey.
a Dewey. He pulls a Dewey.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Dewey always survives, but he does not give final boy.
He's not a final boy.
You know, Kurt kind of has more of a Dewey vibe than a final boy vibe. A Chris, rather.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Good point. Very good point. So as like, this is kind of the definition of a final girl as presented by Carol J. Clover, the person who
saw it and defined it
this idea
after watching 80s slashers.
Yeah, there's a lot in slasher genre that hadn't happened by then. I'm thinking specifically of sequels.
Yes.
And creating a franchise.
Right. Which requires something different from a final girl.
Yes. So to me, you know, I'm thinking about those big final girls like Laurie Strode, like Sidney Prescott, who have to evolve and keep surviving through the franchise.
And not only that, but like her survival as a final person becomes less crucial because there are other fan favorite characters who also kind of need her survive sometimes.
Yeah.
And maybe not forever, maybe not as long as the final girl, like Randy.
Yeah.
You know, or like Dewey and Gail Weathers, you know? Like Sydney has like these other people who survive longer because they know that it's a franchise and that these are characters that the fans love. Mm-hmm. So you don't, when you're writing a singular movie, you can have just one person survive and not worry about the sequels.
Exactly.
Or you can have that one final girl die in the final confrontation too.
Or die in the final confrontation, or like what happens in a lot of horror movies that end up getting a franchise is that the final girl might die at the beginning of the second one.
Oh yeah, so that a new one can kind of
what they do
in.
with Nancy Thompson is she's not in the second one at all, and she comes back for the third one, and that's where she dies.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, being able to survive the film and evolve into different stages of your final girl
girlness
form, yes, throughout a franchise.
It does make me kind of interested in the fact that this movie, The Final Girls, is kind of set up for a sequel in the sense that Camp Bloodbath has a sequel.
They literally start a sequel.
Cruel Summer.
Yeah.
And yeah, we leave them still in the stuck in the movie. They don't succeed in what they're trying to do. All of her friends come back to life, which is great. Love that for her. But like Max is still stuck in this movie.
And now they have to go through another one.
And they still don't have their final girl because it seems like this was still supposed to be Paula's movie.
So here's my thought.
Yeah.
I think that Max is the final girl.
Yeah.
Because she does kind of end up taking up the mantle of trying to defeat Billy.
Explicitly the final girl. She says she's going to be it.
She is, yeah. But then really what, again, the linchpin is for me is that very final scene where they see Billy coming in through the hospital.
The machete.
With the thing, and she takes, like, she's hooked up to an IV, and she, like, takes the thing.
Oh, yeah, not the machete, that.
She starts to, like, run at him. Like, she immediately goes into action.
She does, like, some little, like, swirling with it, like she knows how to handle a weapon.
Oh, no, I thought that was Billy. I thought he was
I know.
doing
I think
that.
she did it.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, so like she takes.
She's ready for battle.
Yeah,
is the
she
point.
takes up a weapon and she goes. She acts, right?
Yeah.
So to me, Max is the final girl.
Yeah, she's not even waiting anymore. She is the pursuer now.
Yes. Yeah.
In the way
she's
that
like,
Nancy becomes.
It's going down.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, she gives final girl. Nancy doesn't really give final girl. No. I mean, there's a reason why she dies, but mostly because honestly, it's that like quote unquote masculine thing that she lacks. She's like too sweet.
Yeah.
She doesn't fight. Even when she sort of does get involved in the fight against Billy, you know, she like protects Max when they're in the Billy's house, cabin, whatever. They all get in on the fight, but like.
And again, she draws Billy out by stripping.
Yeah.
Not final girl behavior.
Yeah, final girl would never.
And then, that's also another really big part of it, like we were just mentioning earlier, is like the final girl's relationship to the psycho killer.
And it's interesting in this one because Max doesn't really have one, but she does have a connection to the movie as a whole,
Yeah.
like a very particular, specific connection that none of the other characters have.
Yeah.
So I think, in a way, the movie itself is kind of the psycho killer because it's what's trapping them there and
true.
forcing them to. So I
Yeah.
kind of saw that as like her connection, but it's a little more tenuous.
Yeah.
Billy Murphy doesn't care about her.
No.
He hardly even knows she's exists.
She's not even there to be a counselor. He's there to kill counselors.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
not
yeah.
even a counselor.
He does not give a fuck about her.
So by Carol J. Clover's definition, Max could be a final girl.
Yeah.
But
She sort of
again,
puts herself into it.
Unfortunately, Max is not in a slasher movie.
Yes.
We just keep coming back to it.
She is not in a slasher movie because, as you said, she's in a comedy, and more specifically, I think she's in a comedy that well, it doesn't need to be a comedy, but she's in a story that exemplifies the hero's journey.
Yeah.
So let's get ready for
Literary Corner.
That was quick. That was
Thank
good.
you. Thank you.
The hero's journey. It's just sort of like a way of understanding a narrative that was popularized by Joseph Campbell.
Oh, that guy. Yep.
But that guy, Campbell.
Joseph Campbell's kind of a dick.
Well, we will.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I love that. Let's talk about Joseph
Yeah,
Campbell.
and he also was not the first person to kind of come up with the idea of like a hero's journey, and he himself has admitted that he was heavily influenced by Carl Jung's work. So like, but in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is the book that Campbell wrote about it, he describes the hero's journey, like this narrative arc, as, quote, a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man.
Boons.
Boons! Yeah, and you can kind of hear the sort of 3-act structure of that.
Sure, yeah.
Starts out at home, goes into the supernatural, comes back changed.
Yeah.
You know? And
But you were mentioning how many steps are there?
there are actually 17 steps.
17 steps.
Not all of which are in like every hero's journey that he identifies, and they aren't always in the exact order he says.
Sure.
But they do kind of follow this general.
Well, you gotta shake it up a little.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think it's of note that a lot of like Joseph Campbell's main work, he is like a literature person, but he isn't like specifically a folklorist. Like there are people who make it their job to look at narratives from the beginning of time throughout the world and sort of think of like links between them and like typify them in different ways. And there are like lots of different versions of like, you know, the different type of like quote unquote Cinderella stories. Like that has a specific name that folklorists use.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, that there's like the idea that there's really only like 8 different stories or something.
And the thing is that a lot of people have criticized Campbell's work because he specifically calls the hero's journey a monomyth and says that is the story that underlies all stories.
Oh.
He's like, it's the only one.
It's
I cracked the code.
It's all a hero's journey.
Yeah, and all these folklorists are like, sure it is. When you self-select for stories that fit the arc that you were looking for, then and leave out all of these other stories that are about heroes and like don't follow that arc, then sure, that's a monolith. But otherwise, it doesn't really hold.
All right, Joey C.
Yeah, so like a lot of folklorists don't really like him. Which
it's my understanding he's kind of an asshole. Is he still around?
I don't know.
I think
and I don't know much about him as a individual, as a person. I just know that his work has been since criticized.
Oh no, he died in 87.
Oh
yeah, no.
Interesting. 87.
Oh shit, October 30th, 87.
Oh wow.
Anyway, I'm sorry, keep going.
I mean, the other thing he gets criticized for, actually, to go to him maybe being kind of an asshole, but also maybe just a creature of his time.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that his monomyth is very like Eurocentric and very like masculine focused.
He's American. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's very
He's a white American man.
Yeah, and it's like Star Wars is held up as like a classic hero's journey, and it's like a story of like a white
Harry Potter.
Yeah, American, not American man, but you know, like a white guy, you know. And I do think like even if
Lord of the Rings,
it doesn't, even though it doesn't really work as like a monomyth in the way that he said, I do think that a lot of specifically like American Western stories in our media now, in our stories, in our movies, in our books, are kind of hero's journeys. Kind of either because of Campbell's influence or because, I mean, I do think he was onto something. This does fit a lot of stories, and there is something that we like about this kind of arc.
There's definitely something to be said about humans' connections to stories. It's like kind of the whole point of us.
Yeah. And I do think like this hero's journey in particular in like America, in like the Western world, in this sort of Eurocentric masculine way does have a hold, you know. And there are also women who go on hero's journeys and stuff. I think actually that like Alice in Wonderland is kind of like an interesting hero's journey of like starting in the normal world, going into literally an underworld, and then coming back kind of changed.
Totally changed, yeah.
You know?
But of course that story is written by a super pervy dude.
And a white Western guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Anyway.
And even though horror movies are also a not specifically American genre, but a lot of the ones we cover have been very American, you know, and the slasher is pretty white Western masculine, you know, as we were just saying, male gaze and all of that, you know, that despite that, horror movies don't tend to really follow a horror, like a hero's journey model. Like it doesn't really happen. Like it can be done. I feel like, you know, just the idea of a haunted house could give that vibe of like starting in a normal world and then it becoming kind of like this underworld thing and then coming back, you know. And I also specifically thought of The Descent, where they literally go into like an underground.
Descend. Yeah.
You know? Yeah. But since horror films tend to be kind of like more focused on just sort of like the fears and the threats and like the suspense and like the plot more than character development, as we've said, horror movies tend to have pretty kind of weak character. You know, I mean, they do the job.
Yeah.
And their job is not to be like these deep character studies. But that means it's not a really...
Because they're not supposed to survive long enough to
for us to care that much.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're on a hero's journey, like the character is on a hero's journey, we have to care about them evolving and changing and coming back changed.
And
we
surviving.
Like have to care about the character in a way that we like, even with the final girl, don't tend to care in that same
my
way.
favorite horror movies are when everybody dies at the end.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I think there is something we said about the final girl arc is kind of that if you break the hero's journey down to its bare bones kind of works of like starting out as like a normal high school girl and then like gets thrust into this world of darkness and then like comes out the other
Through
side.
No fault of her own.
But like it doesn't work in the same way because she doesn't get like the victory in the end in the same way. Even when she defeats the guy, her world has changed for the worse.
Yeah.
You know, and there have been people who have like sort of made specific hero's journey models for horror, which often involves like kind of like inverting a lot of the steps. Like instead of having the refusal of the call, which is like a classic one where the hero decides like, oh, I'm not gonna be the hero. I could never.
The way like in The Hobbit, where when all of the dwarves come to Frodo's house.
Bilbo's house,
Bilbo's house.
And Bill was like, fuck no.
Then they're like, all right, we're going. You coming too? And he was like, Why
would I ever? I'm cozy in my Hobbit hall.
Yeah, but then he realizes they ate all his food. I'm kidding. But
kind of.
There is something.
Well, and plus there's like, he also has that mentor figure in Gandalf.
Right, yeah.
You know? And like instead in like the horror film, perhaps we have an inverted form of that where instead of this like refusal call and like this mentor figure, we have like an ignored warning from a harbinger, like in Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're refusing the call, it's that they're missing the warning.
Yeah, you don't want to go down that road.
Yeah.
But so always go down that road.
So it's like maybe you can make a hero's journey by like kind of, or like a horror journey by turning the hero's journey on its head. And there's actually this one writer, Tim Wagner, who made like kind of his version of a horror journey. He didn't like put out the steps, but he sort of said like, this is how it could work. And I really like it because he called it the poor bastard's descent into hell. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what you're not going on a hero's journey.
Yeah.
You're going into hell and you're going to stay there.
A final girl kind of is a poor bastard in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And they are kind of just descending into hell and they're never getting out. So like, but that said, I think this film is just sort of a classic hero's journey. And like maybe that's part of why it doesn't feel like a horror movie.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of heroic. She goes on this quest of like self-actualization.
Right. So do you have the steps?
I do.
All 17?
I have all 17 steps. Whoa. I'm going to try to be quick with them. Sure. As I said, they aren't in every story. And there's somewhere I'm sort of like, or it kind of does fit, but it should go earlier in the step. So I'll try to be quick. But this is, I have it all outlined. Okay. So we, of course, start with the call to action, which is when the hero is told that they're a hero. It's when Harry Potter gets the letter saying
you're
that
a wizard, Harry.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it always starts with them in like an ordinary world and things are like,
business as usual.
Good, then at least stable.
Yeah.
And like, Max is beginning in this ordinary world. She's obviously undergone this tragedy, but we're seeing her 3 years later where she's not good, but stable. Yep. She's kind of avoiding anything to do with her mother's film or like anything to do with her mom at all and not really dealing with that grief and is just trying to like survive high school. then she kind of gets a call and to go engage with her grief with her mother, kind of.
Otherwise, she'll fail classics.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of like the call to action and the refusal of the call, because she's initially, that's the second step, refusal of the call. She's initially like very reluctant to attend this double feature. She doesn't want to do it. And she's only convinced because Duncan, who is also kind of a mentor figure, is like, I will help you with your classic homework. Let me take you into my world.
Yes.
You know? And that's sort of like where she starts going into this underworld. And step 3 is the supernatural aid.
Yes.
Which in this stage, it's common for the mentor figure to bestow upon the hero some sort of like supernatural gift.
Yeah.
And like, we don't really have the supernatural in this movie, but it doesn't necessarily have to actually be like magic or something, you know? Though again, with Harry Potter, it's like, why does Harry end up with that cloak of invisibility?
Right.
You know, it's a gift from a mentor figure.
And the Nimbus 2000.
Yeah. He's getting these gifts from like people from before.
Absolutely.
And the best I could think for this one is that we do kind of have Duncan's like really intimate knowledge of this world when they go into it. That kind of gives them a supernatural advantage where they're like,
right,
they're the only ones who know that a psycho killer is coming.
Yeah, he's the one who loves the franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like he can kind of help Max and friends navigate at the beginning in a way that if none of them knew the plot of the movie, they would have been in a much worse situation.
Yeah.
And then we have the crossing of the first threshold.
Yes.
Which is very literal for Max as she steps through a movie screen and enters the movie.
Yes.
But it's just when the hero begins into that underworld stage, that supernatural stage.
Yeah. So they enter the camp, right? And when it's still daytime, everything is beautiful.
I know.
And like there's
kind of Technicolor almost.
an extra amount of flowers blooming that probably wouldn't be blooming. And like you can see all these things floating through the air. And my initial thought was like allergy nightmare. Right? Like all you can see is pollen just like it
floating in the
air. There's all these blooming flowers and plants. I'm like,
but it's because it's a world that actually exists on a Hollywood set.
Exactly.
So of course the nature is beautiful and honestly artificial.
And no one is actually having any.
Oh, another thing about crossing of the first threshold is that it often comes with some sort of threshold guardian who like doesn't want you to cross that path. I don't know how familiar you are with Percy Jackson.
Very unfamiliar.
But before he can enter the camp where all the demigods are, there's like literally a fucking minotaur or whatever in his way.
That's what minotaurs do.
And it like kills his mom, speaking of dead moms.
Damn.
So, and this one, I mean, I guess maybe kind of like the fire serves that purpose. Because it is this monster, almost, this threat, this fire in the theater that you have to get away from. But it is also kind of pushing her towards. It seems almost like it's been divined to push her towards the threshold.
Yeah.
While also being a threat
has to
to
go
her.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. And so this is when she's finally in the other world. And she moves from like this important stage of being in the known and now being in the unknown. And like this world she enters has rules that like defy the conventions of her home world. Where like, if you have sex, you die.
You'll die.
If you're a virgin, then you can access the supernatural powers of the final girl. You know, like those are not real world rules.
Yeah.
So then she is in the belly of the whale, which is when the heroes fully separated from their own world and when the dangers that they're facing are now obvious.
They seem fucked.
Yeah. And this is where the hero kind of like has to step up and like is sort of the beginning of their transformation. So it's normally marked by a setback, which in this case I think is Duncan's death.
Yeah.
Like I think there is a reason why Duncan dies first in this movie, and it's because he's the mentor figure and they need him to die in the same way that Gandalf needed to be taken down by the Balrog.
Yeah.
And the Fellowship had to make do without him.
Until he comes back as Gandalf the White.
Yes. Yeah, he's the one with the knowledge, and that's just like a resource that the hero can't have. Max needs to like have her own journey without that experience to lead her.
Yeah.
And she does kind of like start to take up the call. She sort of realizes that like, okay, we need to survive the Murphy, which means we need to make sure Billy Murphy dies.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Yep.
We need to follow Paula or whatever, you know? So then she begins the road of trials. We're only on step 6.
Okay.
I'm trying to be fast.
Nope, you're doing awesome.
The hero must undergo a series of tests, often coming in 3s, because you know 3 is a
magic
great
number.
mythological number.
Fantastic number.
And I was trying to think of like what are her main tasks that she has to face like before, you know, Billy Murphy has the ultimate threat. She needs to keep Nancy from having sex so that she doesn't die.
Right.
She has to get the movie characters to believe her about the fact that they are living in a horror movie.
Yeah, she has to keep Tina from taking off her clothes.
Yes. And she has to figure out what to do after our final girl Paula dies.
Yes.
So these are like trials that she has to face. She certainly has trials to face. And then she has number 7, the meeting with the goddess, which is like when the fellowship meets with Galadriel, the elven queen.
Yeah.
It's a very goddessy sort of side.
She knows all the stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. She's
And
got
often
knowledge they don't have.
She often gives gifts.
Like the strands of her hair.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And like the elven bread and stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in this case, I think Nancy is the goddess. Like Max kind of
is?
I think she receives this blessing from Nancy in the form of like, she gets kind of like closure with her mom. And I also think back to that scene with the kind of gauzy, the blue light over everything where it feels kind of like ethereal and maybe kind of, goddessy, where it's this moment. Like this is like this, Max gets strength from her relationship with Nancy that allows her to go on and become the final girl. Mm-hmm. And she even gets a physical gift in the form of that friendship bracelet.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like she actually gets a gift from a goddess figure.
Right.
And I also think in the way that Max sees her mom as sort of like beyond what her mom actually was.
Yes.
And just sort of idolizing her.
Yep.
And like seeing her in the form of Nancy, that it makes Nancy become kind of a goddess figure.
Yeah.
Whether she actually is or not, like I think to Max she is.
Yeah.
And right after that, step 8 is woman as the temptress. Which actually made me think more of like the Odyssey and like the women that he faced where they're like sorceresses and stuff, like Circe and stuff. But it doesn't have to like involve specifically like a physical woman. But it does represent the hero being tempted away from like the job that they are supposed to accomplish, their quest, by the allure of like physical pleasures or like some sort of conflicting desire, like earthly desire. And I do think maybe that's like Max sort of trying to convince herself that she can like save Nancy and they can go live in the valley.
Yeah.
She gets kind of distracted from what she needs to do, which is like get her friends out of there alive.
Nancy's not real, man.
Yeah, she like kind of puts Nancy above all the rest of her friends, her actual living live friends, and they almost all end up dead. Like her priorities kind of change in a way that's maybe not great. And then we get to Atonement with the Abyss, which is kind of like our halfway-ish point, which is where the hero must confront the ultimate power over their life, often something representing patriarchal power or the power over life and death, which is a psycho killer kind of outlined right there.
Yeah, Billy Murphy.
Yeah, it's Billy Murphy. And like from this point on, from like the point of Tina's striptease on, the rest of the movie is about confronting Billy.
Yeah.
And like confronting death and like confronting grief and all of that. Like that is the focus. So then we get into apotheosis, which is when the hero reaches a greater understanding. And I think that's like kind of when Max finally admits to herself that like to get out of this film and to kill Billy Murphy, she needs to move on from her mom's death and she needs to let Nancy sacrifice herself. And this is like the stage where where the hero completes their transformation into like their full heroic whateverness into the final girl. And that's like when she becomes it and gets kind of like the supernatural powers of that and can like fight Billy in a way that like she has no reason to be able to fight the way she does, but she's a final girl, so she fights.
Yep.
Now where we enter the third act, which gets a little different for this one, which is there's the ultimate boon, which is like the completion of the hero's quest. The hero has to make themselves pure and prove themselves worthy before they can receive their reward.
They have to purge themselves of undesirable characteristics.
Very in line with a final girl.
Yep.
And
such as the relentless pursuit of personal pleasure. Yep.
And it's when Max turns the monster's weapon against him and like decisively defeats him. But then we get like, this is where things get a little mixed up with this movie, because we have like the refusal of return, where it's like the hero doesn't want to go back home. They're a hero now. They don't want to go back home.
They understand that they've been permanently changed.
And it's you can kind of see that with Frodo too. He doesn't want to go back home. He sort of, and he never really does go back home, but he does physically. And the best I could think of was that Max sort of like doesn't want Nancy to sacrifice herself. She's ready to let Nancy be the final girl and die herself. Like Max is ready to die instead, because after living in a world where she gets to have her mother back, she doesn't really want to live in another world.
Yeah.
And then there's like the magic.
Just reminding me of Happy Death Day.
Yes.
Well, especially the sequel.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The magic flight, step 13, which is when the hero returns with the boons or lessons learned, but that journey is often just as perilous as the one getting there. And like, seems like something that maybe, see, this is where heroes' journeys and horrors don't really work. And like in this movie, it doesn't even really work because this story is kind of incomplete because there's still the sequel. Like they haven't finished returning.
Yeah.
It seems like the magic flight is maybe through the sequel and then they'll get home.
Oh, and then they get home. Yeah.
You know? And there's also supposed to be like a rescue from Red Out where they get help from allies. And I think maybe that's why Max's friends are all returned at the end. Or like why Chris never dies in the first place. Because they're kind of there to remind Max why she needs to go back to the real world and to like help her face Billy. But also I'm thinking about how in the original script, I don't know if you read anything about this, but they didn't have an ending where all of her friends came back to life. They had it a lot more bleak where it was just her waking up in the hospital room, maybe with Chris, I don't know.
And it was the sequel still?
Yeah, but all of her friends were dead.
Yeah.
And they changed it because like it sort of tested as too dark for what the audience wanted.
Sure.
And that just really sort of like finalized for me that this is not a horror film, because I feel like in a horror film, those sort of deaths are just like really accepted and like expected.
Yep.
Like, but since this is not that, the story needed to bring back Max's friend because the hero deserves a reward for their sacrifice.
Yeah.
And it's like, if she sacrificed her mom, then she deserves to have her friends.
Back, yeah.
Like, that's what non-horror audiences want.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like, none of the Camp Bloodbath people needed to survive because we've accepted that they are in a horror movie and they are meant to die.
Yeah.
Like, even Nancy deserves to die because she's, like, sacrificing herself. You know? 15 and 16 are Crossing of the Return Threshold and Master of Two Worlds, which really rely on the hero actually completing their journey home.
Which we don't
Which
get.
Max doesn't do.
Yeah.
But I do think in that part that you were talking about where we see Max really coming into her final girlness, where she's sort of mastering both like the sort of emotional maturity she needed in the real world and was lacking, and like openness. She has like she's friends now and she's maybe pursuing something with Chris, you know?
Yeah.
But she also still has that final girl, you know, aggressiveness, ability. Like she has a bit of both worlds in her now. She's kind of mastered them both. And then 17 was the very last one, Freedom to Live. This is when the hero sheds the fear of death and so can finally live. And I think there is something to be said in this one for Max not having to accept like her own inevitable death, but the death of her mother. You know, that it's kind of a bit of a twist on it. It's like her own ability to live that Max has to accept. Especially in the original script where like the first time we see her after her mom died, you know, 3 years have passed. She's apparently like in middle of a suicide attempt when Gertie calls.
Sweet God.
Yeah,
Okay.
they changed that.
Yeah.
But it is sort of like, yeah, after her mom's death, Max is kind of stuck in her grief and not moving on with her life.
Yeah.
Whereas now at the end of the film, we see her like literally fighting for her life and like ready to live and accepting what's happened.
And ready to do it again through the sequel.
Yes.
Yep.
So I just think
A movie she probably has not seen.
Yeah. Oh God, no.
But
Duncan's back.
alive. Yes.
Duncan's back. Yeah.
Also, that final scene gave me the end of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh yeah.
Right? Where Nancy faces the monster and was like, you
And
don't
it's
have power
done.
over me. Give me back my friends and my mom,
Yeah.
right? And then they go into that scene very sort of ethereal.
Yeah.
And where it seems like she's got everybody back, but it's not really the case.
Which is the twist that makes it not a hero's journey, but a horror film.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, I think, ends on kind of a hopeful note because we trust that Max has it in hand now. Like, we trust that her abilities are strong enough and she has all her friends back. So she's going to get them out of there and it's going to be fine. And maybe there will be a sequel about it and it'll be tough for her to do it, but she'll do it.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. She just gave hero vibes to me more than
Final
Final Girl vibes.
Yeah. Even though there does seem to be a bit of overlap
There does.
in that Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sort of a difference in the outcome when it comes to like the reward.
Absolutely.
And like what happens after. It's like mostly in that ending where it's like you get a return from the underworld if you're a hero. And if you're not, then you're just living in the underworld forever.
Yeah.
Which is interesting callback to Persephone and Eurydice.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
And they also like the way that, a final girl's like boon is just not dying.
yeah, that's it. That's all you got.
But also like, I think about, again, because what Carol J. Clover I think is not taking into account is franchises.
Yeah.
Because they're not really a thing yet. That as a character like continues to move on through their franchise and like continuing to, face their psycho killer, that usually you see the community around them being like, that chick's fucking weird.
Yeah.
Right? Like they kind of are, they do become social outcasts
Well, I also
when they
think,
come back from their journey.
which, yeah. I also think, though, there's something about how, like, their ability to survive kind of almost becomes less of a boon because they also have to be there as everybody that they get close to around them dies.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, then what am I surviving for?
Yep.
Which we definitely see with like Sydney being like, I'm just going to close myself off from the world now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's all I got to say. That's the hero's journey.
Are you ready to play a game?
Yeah, let's play a quick game.
Let's play a game. So we know that we are late to the party, but we decided to create a Final Girl bracket.
Yes, a mini March Madness.
We're calling mini March Madness is great. I'm also calling it the Final Girl Final Four.
Oh, I like it.
But it's kind of a mini May Madness because this episode's coming on May. So we've got 4 final girls. And so my criteria for these final girls were a few things. I wanted final girls in movies we had covered on this podcast, which is why Laurie Strode's not on there. Okay. So we've got 2 rounds, or rather 3 rounds, right? 4 people.
Yes.
And then the victors will go up against each other and we will know who is the final girl of 2025.
According to just these 2 people.
All right, and our first matchup in the right-hand corner with no less than 5 movies under her belt. It's Sydney Prescott from Scream. Sydney, we love you, Sydney. Okay. Honestly, Sydney is my pick to win, but
coming in hot.
And then in the other corner, I don't remember if I said left or right.
You said right.
Right, in the left corner, the OG final girl herself, Nancy Thompson from A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Ooh.
Okay.
Clap, 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 clap,
Clap, clap, clap. So this is great because we have discussed Sydney and Nancy both quite recently.
And throughout this episode.
They've
been one of our 2 of our main examples of final girls.
So basically, if we are pitting them against each other, your original thought was...
I thought you meant that we were going to be like, who would win in a fight?
Who would win in a fight? Sydney Prescott versus Nancy Thompson.
And I will say, if Nancy had the time,
yes,
perhaps Nancy.
Probably Nancy.
If they just had to go at it, I think Sydney.
But also Sydney is quite cautious.
Yeah.
So like Nancy could set traps, but I don't
Sydney
know. If
might be canny enough to see them coming.
Yeah, and avoid
That's
them.
a good point. She's very paranoid.
So
she's very alert.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I realized paranoid wasn't the right word.
So you were thinking, just who would win in a fight, which is not inherently bad.
Yes.
But I was just thinking, okay, well, we've already talked about
what makes a final
girl. Makes a final girl. So of these 2, which one final girl's the hardest? Yes.
And as you said before, one of the things that you were thinking about in pairing them up was having one that was like before his chainsaw herself. No, her chainsaw herself.
Her body himself.
God, there's no chainsaw in that.
No,
the other one that has
it's
the
Men,
chainsaw.
Women, and Chainsaws. That's the book that was written a few years later. Yeah.
Sorry. But anyway, one before that.
Yes.
That Clover was sort of like basing her ideas on. And one after it that is now in a world where we know of final girls.
Yes.
And like, in Scream's case, is very aware of the final girl and the archetypes and all of that.
Yeah. So if we're just putting them head to head, which one final girl's the best? Nancy stays a virgin, where
and
Sydney
is very sexually unavailable.
Very sexually unavailable.
So uninterested in sex.
Yes. Whereas Sydney is also uninterested in sex, but ends up having sex
in a very gay way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or at least a very asexual comphead way.
Yeah.
Like she just doesn't want to have sex. She's just having it because she can and feels like she should.
Yeah, she feels like she should at a certain point.
But then she has boyfriends later and she eventually gets married and has a kid.
Kids, yeah.
So she still has sex with men.
Right. Not a great
I have
start.
Doubt.
They both stay away from drugs.
Does Sydney drink at all when they're at the party? Because I know alcohol consumption is happening.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember Sydney actually drinking. If she does, she doesn't drink enough to get like drunk.
Yeah. She might have like a beer.
I'm just trying to think if Sydney was even ever tempted with alcohol. Yeah. And I guess she is there and they're at a party and she could be drinking and she's not. And then with Nancy, I'm like, I don't think she knows how to get a hold of alcohol.
Well, her mom's an alcoholic.
That's true, though.
She knows how to get a hold of
alcohol.
That's a good
point. But I meant in the sense of like teen partying.
Yeah.
I don't see Nancy going to teen parties.
No.
Though, what's his name?
Rod.
Yeah. He's a bad boy.
He's a bad boy.
He's in trouble for drugs, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet he's got some substances.
Musician type.
You know. Yeah. But I don't think Nancy would partake.
So technically, Nancy does get a point for virginity.
Yeah.
But see, here's the thing, though. So my money is on Sydney, and here's why. Because, again, sort of my personal understanding of what makes a final girl,
and how it has evolved.
Is the ability to show up and survive through sequels. So Sydney, so there's some Scream movies she's not in.
Yes.
Like she's not, actually just one, she's not in 6.
Yeah.
At all. So she's in 5 Scream movies and she survives all of them. Right?
That's pretty badass.
That's pretty fantastic.
Nancy's in 2 and survives 1.
And she dies in the middle or in the climax of the 3rd one because she's not in the 2nd one.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, the survival of the final girl, Sydney Prescott is final girl's harder than Nancy Thompson.
Though I also think what Sydney is fighting against is a little bit. She's just fighting against some guys.
Human beings, where Freddy is,
and all of their like quote unquote supernatural aspects are explained away by like there are actually 2 of them.
Yes,
you know, things like that where like they're not actually supernatural.
Yeah,
and like in the 5th one, which she does survive, she's not actually one of the main targets of the thing. She doesn't even have that like personal connection with the psycho killer in the way that one should.
Yeah,
like. I don't know. I feel like the cards are stacked a little against Nancy, I guess is what I'm saying in this case.
She is fighting a literal Nightmare King. That's
and
a lot.
Like her ability to like respond to that and like take control of the dreams in a way, like just right off the bat as like a 16-year-old or whatever is like very impressive.
Yeah.
Like that's a certain amount of power that like not just anybody has.
Right. Right. And so it is worth noting that Nancy does not get to defeat her psycho killer because her psycho killer is of a different nature.
Yes. She never defeats him. He never gets defeated.
No. But at least...
because he cannot be defeated.
In the original Scream, Sydney does...
get that final confrontation and kills him.
Kills
often with
Billy.
help.
From Gail, yeah.
Yeah.
Is she also the one who kills Stu? I forgot who kills Stu.
Stu, the TV.
She shove the TV on him?
The TV.
That's playing Halloween?
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. So, yeah, Sydney...
she gets those kills, and then in the 2nd one, we saw her again kind of share kills, but like get the final kills.
Yeah, Sydney just often... I think she gets to prevail over her psycho killer more often. And you make a good point that... it's just not fair because her psycho killers are human dudes.
Yeah.
Whereas...
but I mean, it's not like it's easy to take down somebody who's coming at you with a knife.
Yeah,
you know, if you don't have a weapon or whatever. Normally the way she ends up taking them down is by getting a gun somehow.
Yeah. But they do both like adapt. Yeah. You know, Nancy gets into survival. She sets booby traps.
She's into survival.
Sydney's an early adopter of caller ID.
Yes.
So
I do think it takes maybe Sydney a little bit longer to like fully step into her because we know we're in Franchiseville now. Mm-hmm. She kind of has she has like a 3-movie arc where she fully realizes her final girl powers.
Yes.
Whereas Nancy like really does it quickly and is like, yeah, I'm reading a book about booby traps. What do you want? Yeah. I'm a final girl. Yes. Which is very cool of her.
Okay, so Sydney versus Nancy, who's your winner?
It's hard because Nancy is such a classic.
I know.
And has that virginity and all of that stuff. But they both have the sexual unavailability nonetheless because I don't believe Sydney's actually interested in it.
No.
But there's something more like... I don't know. For me, it's Nancy.
For you, it's Nancy.
For you, it's Sydney.
For me, it's Sydney.
Oh my God, how do we do this?
Let's give it to Nancy.
No, let's give it to Sydney.
Okay.
I feel like, I feel like for your reason of she survives more movies, I will let that be.
Yeah.
That she has had a bigger mark on like franchise stuff.
Yes. You're right. She does get an entire trilogy where Nancy does not.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's a mark in her favor in terms of like ultimately winning out. And as I said, I do think she could take Nancy. Even if Nancy had time to prepare, I think she could take Nancy.
She could probably take
Unless Nancy could pull her into the dream realm. Yeah. That's the only way. And I don't think Nancy's figured out that power yet.
Yeah.
If she had a 3-movie narrative arc, she would.
She would. She'd be
unstoppable. She didn't get that.
No.
So I think it's Sydney.
Okay, Sydney Prescott. Okay, so Sydney Prescott, moving on to the final round. We have to find out who she's
the final girl
against. In the right-hand corner, we have Ashley Joanna Williams, a.k.a. Ash, from The Evil Dead.
A final boy?
Yep.
You gotta.
Versus... I Know What You Did Last Summer's Julie James. Played by...
She's the heel in this case. All the audience is booing.
Boo. Really? Why?
I don't know. Just to make it different. Just to go with your wrestling theme.
Yeah, right. You just go with it. Yeah. played by Jennifer Love Hewitt. So again, we have the representative of a horror film from before the establishment of the idea
final
of a final girl, and one after.
And I would love to know Clover's take on the final boy.
I would too.
And that play with gender.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was some stuff. I mean, she wrote an entire fucking book, Men,
That's
Women,
true.
and Chainsaws.
And I have not read it. I've been relying on your knowledge.
I've read half of it.
Okay.
It's pretty dense. It's like an academic book.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Anyway, okay, so Ash Williams versus Julie James. Okay, so I'm thinking.
Yes.
Julie, not a virgin.
She's not?
No, doesn't she end up having sex on the beach with her boyfriend?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. That is how the movie starts.
Yeah.
That's how the movie starts.
Yeah, because Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr., they're already established as having a sexual relationship, I
and
thought.
Ryan Felipe.
Oh, my bad, Ryan Felipe. Freddie Prinze Jr. is Julie James is
You're
Ray.
right.
His name's Ray. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. They do have... I totally forgot that that's how that movie starts, because the rest of the movie, she is very unavailable.
Yes, yeah. And remember when Ray is just like, he's trying to tell her about like how successful high school relationships are.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, cite your source.
Yeah. Like, so even when she's in this relationship, and it's a very like committed and like monogamous relationship, she's like a little unavailable, not as interested as he is. And as we discussed in that episode, she is playing a little bit more with like 2000s YA thriller ideas.
Right, yes.
Which allows their women to have sex, because that's now a form of like feminism that is important to us as a society. Yes. So like the virginity is less important than the like being above the need for sex.
Right.
I guess.
And she does get into it. Like she does have that a final confrontation with the psycho killer. Right?
Yeah, she hits him with the whatever she knocks him over off the boat, right?
Yeah. And he drowns.
Dies.
Yeah.
Assuredly.
Yeah. But it's also worth noting that again, so Ash, he's got a girlfriend.
I assume
Linda
sucks. Yeah, he has two Lindas.
He has multiple.
If he has not
Lindas.
slept with any of those Lindas, I would be very surprised.
Right, exactly.
Especially in the second version of the first film,
in Evil Dead 2, which is like a beat for beat reshot of the first Evil Dead,
but with significant changes that matter, I think.
Yeah.
There's like they're alone together at the cabin, so there's like a pretty long sequence of her like dancing and them being like sexy together and making out and stuff. Yeah, it seems
being sensual.
He does not seem unavailable.
No,
I will say.
Then I think about
substances.
Does Ash do the substances though?
I mean, they're definitely all there to party.
They are partying.
So their way of partying is to have like a nice dinner together, and I think they're having like. In my mind, they have glasses of wine, or they have like a beer. It's like very adult party.
Yeah.
But I don't think. And Julie, she's at that like graduation party, end of the year party, where people are drinking.
Yeah.
Before she goes and has sex with her boyfriend. Yeah. Are they drinking? I mean, no, she's not. Right? Isn't it a part of the plot that Ryan Felipe is drinking? Yes,
and he's the one who's driving.
And he's the one who's driving. So then that's a problem. But like, oh, we could say, one of the girls was driving because they're not drunk or something. Like that's one of the things they have. So but that also, again, doesn't seem like a key part of her character.
Yeah. And then I think about, the way that they interact with their existential terror, because Ash Williams doesn't actually have a psycho killer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a different situation in Evil Dead.
Yeah. Because it's less of a slasher.
But I think about, it does take him a minute to come around, but he does end up taking up a weapon and acting against the Deadites. Yeah. Right?
And he has a very personal connection to, if not the Deadites themselves, then the people that the Deadites are possessing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right.
And like those Deadites are like stalking him and like taunting him.
Yes. And then it's worth noting that in the second film, he gets his hand cut off and replaces it with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Right? So, come on.
Yeah.
And then also something I wanted to say about Julie. Like they have the connection to the killer because
They did something
They
bad.
did something to him. This is the thing. The Deadites to me are just there to cause chaos. And,
it doesn't have that same
emotional
sense
anguish.
of causing punishing for transgressions.
Yeah.
That you often see in slashers, which
Yeah.
is because it's not a slasher, which is kind of points against Ash being a he is a final boy,
Yes.
but him going on in this tournament is that he's not really in a slasher, and I feel like that's a key part.
Right, good
He
point.
doesn't have a psycho killer, whereas Julie does, and she is being punished.
Yes. And it is worth noting that while, again, Ash gets an entire trilogy
Yes,
and 3 seasons of a TV show.
Yeah.
That's worth noting. Julie does survive and goes on to be in the sequel. Now, the sequel...
and it sounds like there's a third one coming out that she will return for.
Well, I don't know nothing about that. But it's worth noting that at the end of the sequel, her and Ray both survive.
Oh, that's true, right? He
Ray
keeps
survives.
surviving.
He survives the first one and he survives the second one.
I forgot.
And then
So she's not really final.
they go on to get married and buy a house, right? And then the final scene in the sequel is Julie is, getting out of the shower and going into her bedroom, right? And she sees Ben Wilson or whoever.
Oh, fuck. The two guys with the same name, practically. The names that are very
Ben
similar.
Wilson and Will Benson.
Yeah,
or some
yeah,
bullshit
whatever the
like
fuck
that.
it is.
I can't remember. Underneath the bed and grabs her, and her fate is uncertain, right? But that could just be a nightmare. I wouldn't be surprised if she had PTSD.
Yeah.
So Julie, she survives. She
She's a
survives
survivor.
2 entire movies.
She's not the only one to survive in the way that Ash is.
Right.
Always the only one to survive. And I feel like the TV show is sort of he's now living in an apocalypse. Or at least in a world where there are Deadites everywhere.
Yeah. Deadites have gotten out, and it's him and a couple of his confidants.
Yeah.
Have to go fix it. They're not overrunning the
in the whole
world,
place,
but they're
but,
around,
they're-
and Ash and his confidants are the only ones who know it. Yeah, that kind
But
of
that
thing.
makes it more of a supernatural hunter kind of story.
And then again, he
and
does,
not a final girl.
and then he does, especially in the TV show, Ash does kind of become that social outcast. They're just this fuck, he's crazy. He thinks
just feel like he isn't-
there's demons.
I feel like his arc kind of takes him farther away from being a final girl and into just being a normal sort of not action hero, but but yeah, kind of but in the supernatural sense.
sort of like a Sam or Dean.
Yeah.
From Supernatural.
Yeah, like a Winchester, you know? Neither of them are final girls, even though they're often people who survive, you know?
So does this mean we're giving it to Julie James?
Which seems wrong.
It does
It always
feel
feels
wrong.
wrong when the heel wins.
Yeah,
I
right?
told you she was the heel.
Okay, well, no, but this is good because now we're in our final standoff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's, people are not betting money on Julie. I'll tell you that. It'll be a real upset if she pulls this off.
Yeah, I don't know how odds work.
But the odds are not in her favor.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then Julie wins that round. So now in our final round, we have Sydney Prescott v. Julie James. Worth noting, both of these characters written by Kevin Williamson.
Oh.
Right?
The man knows his final girl.
The man knows a final girl. And it is worth noting that both of these final girls are from an era post
Which I wonder if that helps.
understanding of the final girl.
Helps them fulfill their final girlness because they know what they're supposed to be fulfilling.
Yeah, they can
and
final
they're
girl better.
Purposeful about the things that they don't fulfill.
Yeah.
Specifically the sex part. Because that's just not a thing that matters in our society in the same way.
Right. Well, yeah. So if we're down to Sydney and Julie, we know neither of them are virgins.
Yeah.
Right? We've talked about their lack of substance use.
And we know that even then, though, even if they aren't virgins, they still have they aren't overruled by their desires.
Yeah.
And also they end up in committed, married, monogamous, heterosexual relationships.
Yep.
So they're still not virgins, but they're doing sexuality in the correct way, quote unquote.
Yeah. A way that is acceptable for women.
And not needing of being punished.
Yeah. So, thinking about it again, I feel like Sydney just goes through more. Again, she's in 5 movies and Julie's only in 2.
It's hard to compete with Sydney just because of how much she's been through and how much she continues to grow as just a badass.
And again, if we had a Laurie Strode on this list, then we would be having a different conversation.
If we ever do a full Sweet 16 or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think Sydney would do very well. I think she would have very good odds, but I don't know if she would sweep it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's hard to compete with her just in terms of like her kill count.
Yeah. Like she, and again, but then like she also, she does have that partner in Gale a lot.
Yeah, she has
Gale
allies.
does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Though also, as you pointed out, Julie isn't the only one to survive in her movies either.
That's true. Ray survives too.
Yeah.
They're like a final couple.
Becomes less important for the final girl to be alone.
Right. Because she actually still has her man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though that said, Sydney does go through periods of being very isolated.
Yes. But it's also worth noting that like Julie and Ray should have broken up.
I know! And they did break up for a while. They're going to say it that way.
And then they got back together. Do you think it's like a trauma bonding thing?
Oh
like
my God,
they've just
totally.
been through it. And they're just like, well, you're the only one who understands that crazy shit we went through together.
I mean, honestly, I think that's why Sydney and Randy are still friends later.
Yeah,
you know?
in college. Yeah.
Like, I don't think they were even really that close of friends in high school.
I don't think so, no.
But like, yeah, they get it.
Yeah. So then to me, it has to be Sydney.
I mean, I just don't see any way that it could be Julie against Sydney.
Yeah.
Like, against Nancy. No, it would still be Nancy over Julie.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of what's working against her is that, like I say in our I Know What You Did Last Summer episode, she is sort of bridging slashers and like YA thrillers.
Yeah.
She's sort of a bridge between those. So she's not really doing final girl tropes. Like, that isn't the only trope she's fulfilling. She's also filling other archetypes.
Yeah.
As she sort of steps into that world.
Right. And like the
Whereas
way that
Sydney is just a final girl.
she was against Ash Williams and Evil Dead isn't even really a slasher.
Yeah.
Right?
And even
like,
that was like a toss up.
Yeah. And meanwhile, we put Sydney and Nancy against each other and they are like two actual final girls. Yeah.
Yeah. One who helped define the final girls and one who was made to be a final girl specifically.
I'm going to give it to Sydney.
I think it's got to be Sydney.
It has to be. I'm going to give it to Sydney because while, yes, we do understand throughout the franchise that she is married and does have children and that she is married to a person with a very distinctly man's name.
I know.
We never see them. You know, whereas like we see Julie and Ray together, we see their relationship. And so Sydney, even though we know she's not isolated, always appears that way.
Sexually unavailable in the sense that she has a husband.
Yeah, and kids.
You know?
Yeah.
And like, we don't need to know who they are. We just know they exist and therefore she is unavailable.
Yeah.
And also I think she has more of a personal connection. Like, killers keep coming back.
For her.
And having more specific connections to her.
Yeah.
Until like, you know, the kind of... what is it? Not reboot. Yeah, I guess
the requels.
The
once
requels.
we get into 5 and 6.
Then they're like less related to her because they're sort of stepping her back from being the final girl, and yet she still survives without even being the final girl of the movie. She still survives because damn girl,
because she's Sidney Prescott. Of
she
course, she has a fucking gun.
outsurvives Dewey, who has survived multiple stabbings.
I know, right?
Damn girl. But
I think
even that she just has more personal connection, whereas like like you said, Julie's personal connection is that like. She did something to this guy kind of randomly and by accident.
They did something very irresponsible and dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't really like know him personally. Whereas like Sydney knows the psycho killer in every movie.
Pretty much, yeah.
You know, of those like the first,
in the first 4. Yeah, totally.
And it's like way more personal for her. So yeah, no, it's got to be Sydney.
Got to be.
I think she's a tough one to beat.
Yeah,
like you said, if we had a larger one, brought in some more people.
Yeah, if we brought in Laurie Strode.
Like I said, I really wanted what's her name from Ready or Not, because I think, but she's not really a slasher final girl.
It's not a slasher. Yeah,
it's not a slasher, but I feel like, you know, if we expand it, to not just be slashers,
to
and
be
like
the final
survivor,
usually female character,
the final survivor, you know, and because it's not like, I mean, other people do die in that movie, and I just think that she was an ultimate badass. But again, that was when I was thinking about who would win in a fight.
Right.
And still, Sydney would be hard to beat. I think she's proven that again and again.
Again, I'm thinking in an actual literal fight between Ash Williams and Julie James, Ash is going to win. He has a literal
chainsaw for his hand.
Arm. Yeah.
And Julie James is kind of a nerd.
Yeah.
Not in a Nancy way where she's into survival too.
Yeah.
So this has been Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots.
We've got a theme coming up for the summer. This is our hot alien summer. So join us next month. We're going to kick it off with Alien.
Alien itself.
Another fantastic final girl we haven't technically
could take probably
touched on.
Most of these girls in a fight.
Again, not a slasher. Anyway.
And a full-on adult woman.
Yes. So join us next time. Thank you as always to Sound Guy Matt.
Yes.
Follow us on Instagram at Deep Thoughts Shallow Plots, all one Onward.
You can also get our stuff on YouTube as well as your usual podcatchers.
And until next time, ever since I was a little boy, I dreamed of being a final girl.